Hello everyone, and welcome to Dead Time Stories. Tonight, the storm outside isn't the only thing brewing. True tales so chilling they'll make your skin crawl, yet so mesmerizing you won't be able to turn away. But here's the twist. That distant thunder isn't just atmosphere. It's the key to unlocking your deepest sleep. So before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's story. The road was barely a road at all, just a path of slick earth winding through a forest that seemed to lean inward, branches tangling above like bony fingers interlaced in prayer. Evelyn squinted through the windshield, wipers thumping against a curtain of rain. Her tires slipped in the muck, and she had to grip the wheel harder each time the car swerved toward the ditch. When the house came into view, it was not a relief. The place looked less like a guest house and more like a relic someone had abandoned a century ago. Its roof sagged, its wood siding had turned nearly black with rot, and the upper windows glared blankly down at her, unlit and unwelcoming. Evelyn parked, cutting the engine. The storm seemed louder once the car fell silent. She lifted her umbrella, stepped out, and crunched across the gravel toward the porch. Before she could knock, the door creaked open. A man filled the frame. Tall, bony, with a limp in his right leg. His coat hung too large on him, its fabric shiny with years of rain. His face was thin, and though his eyes seemed tired, they had a sharpness that unsettled her. "Your room 3," he said. His voice was coarse, like stones grinding. "Yes," Evelyn said, her voice a little too quick. "Just for a few nights." He handed her a key, the brass heavy and cold. "Second floor. Last door on the left." He paused. "Keep the hallway lights on." She tried to smile, to break the tension. "Because it's haunted?" His gaze didn't shift. "Because they don't like the dark." And with that, he turned, limping away into the shadows of the house, leaving Evelyn on the porch, clutching her umbrella as the storm raged on. Inside, the guest house smelled of damp wood and mildew. She climbed the stairs, flipping the switch at the bottom. The hallway lit up in a weak yellow glow. The light revealed too many doors, packed close together, lining both sides of the hall. The air was still, heavy, as if the house was holding its breath. She hurried to room 3, turned the key, and slipped inside. By midnight, she'd nearly forgotten the man's strange warning. Nearly. Because that was when the lights began to flicker. The lamp on Evelyn's nightstand gave a low, electric buzz. Its glow wavered, swelling bright for a heartbeat before shrinking to a weak pulse, like a dying star. She sat up in bed, the quilt pulled to her chin. The storm pressed against the old house, rattling its bones. Rain lashed the shutters, thunder cracked overhead. Still, none of it explained the deliberate flicker, flicker, flicker. Then the light snapped off completely. The dark was thick, absolute. Evelyn held her breath, ears straining. At first, all she heard was the storm. Then, something else. A soft scuff. Wood groaning under weight. Someone, or something, was walking the upstairs hall. She swung her legs out of bed, heart slamming in her chest. Her hand fumbled against the wall until she found the switch. She flipped it up and down. Nothing. The hallway beyond her door remained smothered in black. Another step. Closer now. "Hello?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer. Only the slow, dragging rhythm of steps outside her room. She pressed her ear to the door. The wood was cold against her skin. From the other side came a whisper, impossibly soft but clear as breath against her ear. "Why did you turn off the lights?" Evelyn jerked back, slamming into the dresser. Her pulse roared in her ears. "I didn't," she whispered hoarsely, though no one could hear her. The knob rattled. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself forward, hands braced against the door. "Who's there?" she demanded, though the words came out thin. Silence. The knob went still. She waited, heart hammering. After a long moment, the dragging steps resumed, moving away down the hall. She followed the sound with her ears, slow, deliberate, until it seemed to fade into nothing. Evelyn stayed pressed against the door for a long time, shaking, until her courage faltered completely. She backed toward her bed, crawled beneath the quilt, and lay rigid. Sleep didn't come. Only the memory of that whisper, clinging to her skin like a hand she couldn't shake off. And when she finally drifted into shallow dreams, she thought she saw the outline of small figures standing in the corner of her room, motionless, watching. When Evelyn finally stirred, the storm had weakened to a drizzle. Pale gray light seeped through the curtains, giving the room a lifeless glow. For a moment she wondered if she'd imagined the night before, if exhaustion and storm noise had tricked her senses. But when she swung her legs from the bed and opened the door, her stomach dropped. The hallway bulbs were lit again. Their yellow glow hummed faintly overhead, buzzing with steady electricity. The floorboards, however, bore faint streaks of moisture, as though someone had dragged wet feet through the corridor. Her shoes were dry. Shivering, Evelyn forced herself to step out. She walked the length of the hall, tracing the streaks with her eyes. They led toward the stairwell, then stopped abruptly, as if whoever left them had simply vanished halfway down. She descended the stairs quickly, determined to find the caretaker. She caught him in the parlor, hunched over a battered ledger. He barely looked up when she entered. "Lights went out last night," she said, her voice sharp from nerves. "And someone was outside my door." The caretaker lifted his eyes slowly. "You left the hallway dark." "No, the power failed," Evelyn snapped. "I didn't choose to." "You left it dark," he repeated flatly. His hands tightened on the ledger. "That was your mistake." Evelyn gaped. "My mistake? Someone tried my door handle." His gaze was unblinking. "If you want to sleep safe, keep the lights on. Don't give them reason to wander." "Them?" Evelyn demanded. But he only returned his attention to the ledger, muttering something under his breath that she couldn't catch. Evelyn left the room, fury and unease mixing in her chest. She wanted to pack her bags, drive away, and never look back. But the storm had turned the road to mud, and her car had already struggled the night before. Leaving now would mean risking getting stuck miles from help. So she told herself she'd endure one more night. Just one. And yet, as she climbed back to room 3, she swore the hallway was quieter than before, listening. Evelyn couldn't shake the words the caretaker had muttered. "Don't give them reason to wander." The phrase gnawed at her through the morning. She tried to distract herself, unpacked her bag, made tea with the cracked kettle in her room, even sat by the window to read, but her attention slipped constantly back to the hallway. Every flicker of shadow felt deliberate, like the house itself was aware of her. Around noon, she forced herself to go outside. The rain had slowed to a mist, the trees dripping steadily. The air smelled of wet bark and soil. For a moment she breathed easier, but the house behind her loomed like a crouching animal, watching her departure. The property stretched wider than she'd realized. To the left, an old shed sagged into the earth. To the right, an overgrown path wound into the woods. And directly behind the guest house stood a swing set, 2 rusted chains dangling, one seat missing, the other creaking in the weak breeze. Evelyn froze. The ground beneath the swing was muddy, but there were no footprints. Still, the chain gave a faint sway, as though someone had only just abandoned it. "You shouldn't linger out there." She spun. The caretaker stood at the back door, hunched as though the daylight itself was heavy on his shoulders. "Why?" she demanded. His gaze flicked to the swing, then back to her. "They notice." Her throat tightened. "Who notices?" "You'll see," he said, then turned and limped back inside. Evelyn followed, frustration boiling. "Look, I don't care about old ghost stories. But last night, something was outside my room. Whispering." He paused in the shadow of the hall. "If they whispered, it's because the dark let them close." His voice lowered. "Tonight, if the lights fail again, don't open your door." Evelyn wanted to argue, to demand answers, but his tone left no space. He shuffled away, vanishing into his quarters. She stood alone in the corridor, staring at the 2 closed doors and the faint hum of the bulbs. The house seemed to hum back. By evening, Evelyn had convinced herself she was being dramatic. She ate a sandwich in her room, read a few chapters of a novel, and left the hallway bulbs glowing like the caretaker insisted. The hum of their filaments was oddly comforting, a fragile barrier between her and the memory of that whisper. Still, dread settled in as midnight crept closer. Every groan of the house, every sigh of wind against the shutters felt rehearsed, purposeful. At 11:47, the storm returned. A rumble of thunder shook the walls, and the bulbs overhead flickered once. Evelyn sat rigid in bed, eyes locked on the hallway lights spilling faintly beneath her door. "Stay on," she whispered, as though the house might obey. The minutes ticked by. 11:55. 11:59. Then, at midnight, the lights snapped out. The darkness was absolute, pressing against her eyelids even when she opened them wide. Evelyn's breath stuttered in her chest. She felt for the lamp, fingers fumbling over the switch. Nothing. From the hallway came the first sound. Drag step. The boards creaked, slow and deliberate. The air seemed to thin, leaving her lightheaded. She pressed her palms over her ears, but the sound pushed through her skin. Then came the whisper, nearer than before. "You left us waiting." Her throat closed. She backed against the headboard, clutching the quilt. The doorknob rattled once. Then again, harder. Evelyn bit back a sob. "Go away!" Silence. She waited, trembling. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then, gentle, deliberate, the sound of fingernails scratching down her door. Long, slow strokes, like someone savoring the contact. Her chest heaved, and she forced herself to remember the caretaker's words, "Don't open your door." So she stayed still, tears blurring her vision, as the scratching trailed lower, lower, until it faded into nothing. At some point near dawn, the bulbs sputtered back to life. Evelyn opened her eyes to weak yellow light, her door scarred with fresh grooves that hadn't been there before. She wasn't imagining it. The house was alive, and it wanted her in the dark. Evelyn couldn't stop staring at the door. In the daylight, the scratches were worse than she'd realized. 5 parallel grooves, raw and splintered, ran from the knob all the way to the floor. The wood was gouged deep, as if carved with purpose, not by accident, not by storm damage, but by something with patience. She traced one groove with her fingertip. The splinters bit her skin, drawing a bead of blood. Her stomach lurched. She left the room quickly, slamming the door behind her. The hallway bulbs buzzed steady now, their glow indifferent to her panic. Evelyn marched down the stairs, fury building, until she found the caretaker in the parlor again. "You knew," she accused. Her voice trembled but sharp. "You knew this would happen." He didn't look up from the ledger. "I told you. Lights on. They went out. I didn't turn them off. The power failed." His pen stilled. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he lifted his eyes. They were dull, exhausted, but behind them lived something else, resignation. "They test you," he said quietly. "At first it's scratching, whispers. If you answer, if you open the door." He trailed off, shutting the ledger with a snap. "That's when they step inside." Evelyn's skin crawled. "What are they?" The caretaker shook his head. "Names give them weight. Don't give them more than the dark already does." She slammed her palm on the table. "I deserve answers. I can't stay here if—" "You can't leave," he interrupted flatly. "Roads washed out. Trees fell across the track. You'd make it half a mile before you're stuck." Her anger collapsed into dread. "So what am I supposed to do?" He leaned forward. His voice dropped to a rasp. "Survive the nights. Keep the lights burning. And never, never speak back when they whisper." Evelyn's chest tightened. Her mind replayed the night before. "Go away," she'd cried. She had already broken the rule. Evelyn couldn't stay near the caretaker. His indifference chilled her more than the whispers ever could. She left him in the parlor, the creak of his chair following her as she climbed the stairs. Halfway up she froze. The hallway looked wrong. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, but the sensation remained. The bulbs buzzed steadily, but the corridor seemed longer. The row of doors stretched farther than she remembered, multiplying like reflections in a warped mirror. She counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, more than last night. The guest house had only 6 rooms upstairs. Now she saw 9. Her stomach nodded. She turned quickly to her door, but room 3 wasn't where it had been. The number plate, brass tarnished, hung on a door farther down the hall. Evelyn whispered under her breath. No. No, it's me. I'm imagining this. The words echoed faintly, too loud for the small space. Her hand shook as she touched the doorknob. Cold, but familiar. She slipped inside and shut it firmly behind her. The room looked unchanged, bed, quilt, her suitcase, the lamp on the dresser, but something was off. The mirror on the far wall reflected the bed at an odd angle, as though the room was longer in the glass than in reality. She crossed to it, testing the frame with her fingers. Solid wood. When she leaned closer, her reflection leaned back, but a fraction late, as though she were being mimicked rather than mirrored. Evelyn staggered away, pulse hammering. From somewhere deep in the house, a floorboard groaned. She sat on the bed, head in her hands. Her breath came too fast, her thoughts crowding over one another. The house is wrong. It's moving, stretching. It wants me to lose my place. A sound rose behind the door. A faint laugh, high, childlike, echoing down the length of the hallway. Evelyn gripped the quilt and rocked forward. I can't stay here, she whispered. But outside, the laugh turned into words. Too late. You already do. Evelyn spent most of the afternoon pacing room 3, refusing to look at the mirror again. Her thoughts ran in frantic loops. Leave now, storm or no storm, just leave. But each time she pictured the washed-out road, her car fishtailing in the mud, she saw herself stranded among the trees. And in her mind, the trees whispered too. By late afternoon, the air inside the room had grown stifling. She cracked the door, telling herself she only needed fresh air. The hallway stretched before her, longer still. The bulbs overhead glowed in neat rows, but their hum seemed louder than usual, like bees trapped in glass. She counted again. 11 doors now. Her hands shook, but curiosity tugged her forward. She stepped past room 4, room 5, numbers unfamiliar in their tarnished brass. She ran her hand along the wall as she walked, grounding herself in the touch of rough wallpaper. The corridor bent subtly left, though she didn't recall any turn before. When she reached the final door, it had no number at all. Just dark wood, scarred with deep scratches, 5 parallel grooves, like the ones carved into her own door. Her throat tightened. She reached for the knob before she realized what she was doing. A voice came from behind it. A child's whisper. We're waiting. Evelyn jerked her hand back, stumbling. She spun and bolted down the hall, feet pounding the boards. The corridor seemed to stretch with each stride, her room receding farther and farther. She gasped. No, no, no! Then a hand shot out from one of the doorways, small, pale, and ice-cold, grasping her wrist. She screamed, wrenching free. The door slammed shut behind the hand, vanishing into silence. Her chest heaved. At last, room 3's door appeared again. She lunged inside, slamming it shut, and pressed her back against it. The buzzing of the bulbs carried faintly through the walls, steady and alive. But under it, Evelyn could hear breathing. Dozens of tiny breaths, pressed close, as if listening through the cracks of the wood. Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat on the bed until the gray light of dawn slipped through the curtains, her eyes fixed on the door as the faint chorus of breaths faded into silence. When she finally forced herself downstairs, she found the caretaker already in the kitchen. He sat at the table, hunched over a chipped mug of black coffee. His expression was worse than weary, it was haunted. She slammed her palms on the table. There are children here. I heard them. I saw. Her voice broke, but she forced it steady. What are they? For a long time, he didn't answer. Then he lifted his gaze. Not children anymore. Evelyn froze. What does that mean? He rubbed a hand over his stubbled jaw. This house, it keeps what it's given. Once, it was a boarding home. Families stayed here when the mill was running. Too many children crammed in narrow halls. The power failed one winter. Lights out for 3 nights straight. When the parents woke, the beds were empty. Her skin prickled cold. Empty? They searched the woods, the town, every road out. Never found a trace. The doors stayed shut, but the scratches started. His voice cracked slightly. And they never stopped. Evelyn backed away, shaking her head. No, that's a story. You're trying to scare me. The caretaker's eyes bored into hers. You think I want to live with them? That I enjoy hearing their nails on the doors every night? He slammed his mug down hard enough to crack the handle. I told you how to survive. Light keeps them still. Dark lets them walk. Evelyn's throat tightened. Why me? Why am I here? He leaned back, shoulders slumping. Because you came. That's all it takes. The silence between them felt thick, unbearable. Somewhere above, the ceiling creaked with the sound of faint, running feet. Evelyn whispered, almost to herself. I need to leave. The caretaker's mouth twisted. The house doesn't let go easy. Evelyn couldn't breathe in the kitchen. The smell of damp wood, the caretaker's hollow stare, the faint patter of phantom footsteps above. It pressed too hard against her chest. She pushed past him, grabbed her coat from the parlor chair, and stormed toward the front door. I'm leaving, she said, not looking back. The caretaker's voice followed her, low and flat. The road won't let you. She yanked the door open. The world outside was gray, the mist thick as gauze. Her car sat at the edge of the gravel, droplets clinging to its windows. She bolted toward it, her boots splashing in puddles. The air smelled wrong, sweet and metallic, like rusted iron. She jammed the key into the door, slid inside, and turned the ignition. The engine coughed to life. Relief swelled in her chest. She slammed the gearshift into reverse. The tires spun. Mud splattered against the windows, but the car lurched only an inch before sinking deeper. Evelyn cursed and floored the gas. The wheels whined, throwing up more mud. She tried forward, then back again. Nothing. Her heart hammered. She forced the door open and stumbled out into the muck. The road that had been little more than a track yesterday was worse now, swallowed by sludge. Trees leaned in from both sides, their branches low, heavy, like skeletal arms. A sound rose from the woods. Laughter. High-pitched. Childlike. Echoing in all directions. Evelyn's skin went cold. She spun, scanning the tree line. No one was there. Only shadows shifting in the mist. The laughter grew louder, overlapping voices, dozens of them. The swing at the back of the house creaked slowly, though there was no wind. She stumbled backward toward the guest house, mud sucking at her boots. At the door, the caretaker waited, his face grim. Told you, he said. Evelyn shoved past him, trembling, her coat dripping with rain and muck. She didn't look back at the trees, but she felt them leaning closer, listening. Evelyn spent the rest of the afternoon pacing the parlor, shivering in her damp clothes. The caretaker said nothing more, only lit a fire in the cracked hearth and sat in his chair, staring at the flames as though hypnotized. She wanted to scream at him, shake him until he gave her answers that made sense, but she was afraid. Not of him, but of what silence protected. By late afternoon, the house grew restless. Floorboards creaked with no weight on them, stairwells groaned as if someone unseen was climbing. Once, Evelyn swore she heard a door slam upstairs. When she bolted to the hall, every door was shut tight. She fled back to the caretaker. It's moving, she said, voice taut. The rooms aren't where they were. I swear the hall is longer. He didn't look up from the fire. It changes. Best not to follow. Evelyn's skin prickled. What do they want from me? His voice rasped like ash. Not want. Need. She pressed him harder. Need what? Finally, his eyes shifted toward her. Company. A chill spidered down her spine. That evening, she forced herself to eat half a slice of stale bread, though her stomach churned. She left every bulb in the hallway burning, checked each twice, terrified of what would happen if one fizzled out. The caretaker passed her once, carrying an old lantern. He paused at her door. "When the dark comes, don't speak to them." "I already did," she admitted in a whisper. His expression tightened. For the first time, he looked almost afraid. "Then pray they think you were dreaming." Night fell heavy. Rain began again, tapping the roof like 1,000 fingers. Evelyn curled beneath the quilt, staring at the strip of yellow light under her door. She kept her eyes on it, whispering to herself, "Stay on. Stay on." At 12:01, the bulbs began to buzz louder. At 12:02, they all went out. The house sank into silence so complete that Evelyn's ears rang. She sat upright in bed, clutching the quilt. Her eyes strained against the black, but the dark was thicker than before, so dense it felt like velvet pressed against her face. Then came the first sound. Step. The floorboards groaned, not far from her door. Another step. Lighter than before. Smaller. Then 2. Then 3. A scatter of tiny feet running down the hall, stopping suddenly. Giggling. The sound of children playing in the pitch black. Evelyn pressed her hands over her ears. Still, the sounds slipped in, faint giggles, the patter of feet, the creak of doors opening one by one. She remembered the caretaker's warning, "Don't answer them." But the voices grew louder. Closer. A knock at her door. 3 soft raps. Then a child's voice, clear and coaxing. "Let's play." Her heart lurched. She buried her face in the quilt, whispering frantically, "No, no, no." The knob rattled. Slowly at first, then violently, shaking in its socket. Nails scratched the wood again, climbing higher, dragging lower. The laughter swelled. Then, abruptly, silence. Evelyn's breath hitched. The air in her room shifted, colder, heavier. She forced herself to lift her head. The mirror across from her bed glowed faintly, though no light shone in the room. Shapes flickered in its surface, children, dozens of them, crowding close. Their faces were pale blurs, eyes wide and black. They pressed their hands against the glass as though it were a window, their lips moving in unison. Though she couldn't hear their words, she knew they were speaking to her. One child's face leaned closer, filling the mirror, mouth stretching in a grin too wide. The bulbs outside sputtered back to life. The mirror went dark. Evelyn sat trembling in the glow of the returning lights, her throat raw with unscreamed fear. From the hallway came a single whisper, drawn out and sweet. "Tomorrow night you'll open the door." Evelyn barely noticed the dawn. She sat slumped in bed, eyes fixed on the mirror across the room. In daylight it looked ordinary again, dusty glass, warped frame. No pale faces, no pressing hands. But she knew what she'd seen. Her body ached as she stumbled downstairs. The caretaker was already there, as if he hadn't moved all night. He stared into his cold coffee, lids heavy. She slammed her palms on the table. They were in the mirror. His head turned slowly. "You looked at it." "I couldn't help it," she snapped. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. "They were there, dozens of them. Scratching, laughing, whispering. They said I'd open the door tonight." The caretaker exhaled, a long rasp. "Then don't." Her fists clenched. "That's it? That's your advice? Don't? I need answers. What are they, ghosts? Spirits? What happens if I open the door?" He stared at her for a long time before speaking. "They come inside." Evelyn's throat tightened. "And then?" His gaze flicked to the fire, though the hearth was unlit. "Then you don't leave. No one does." The words settled on her chest like stones. She swallowed hard. "That's what happened to the children, isn't it? Their parents thought they vanished. But they're still here." The caretaker's face twitched, but he said nothing. "You've been living with them for years," she pressed. "Why? Why not leave?" He gave a hollow laugh. "You think I haven't tried? The road bends back. The woods lead nowhere. Once the house has you, it keeps you. Evelyn staggered back, shaking her head. No. No, there has to be a way out. The caretaker leaned forward, his voice low. There's only one way. Survive until the house tires of you. Pray it finds someone else. And never, ever answer when they ask. But she already had. Twice. And tonight, the voices would be waiting. Evelyn couldn't stand the mirror. Every time she walked past it, she imagined faint smudges on the glass, fingerprints too small to be her own. She grabbed a blanket from the bed and threw it over the frame, tugging it down until no part of the reflective surface showed. But even with it covered, she swore she heard a faint tapping beneath the fabric. Like fingernails, impatient. Her skin crawled. She spent the morning ransacking the room for anything that could keep her safe. She tested the lock 3 times, shoved the dresser against the door, and wedged a chair beneath the knob. The effort left her sweating, but she felt no relief. By noon she wandered the halls, determined to find something, anything, the caretaker wasn't telling her. The hallway had shortened again, back to 6 doors, but she didn't trust it. She touched each knob, each number plate, grounding herself in their cold brass. At the far end, she found a linen closet. Dust coated the shelves, but buried beneath moth-eaten sheets lay an old candle lantern, its glass cracked. Evelyn lifted it carefully. The caretaker appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. Won't help. She spun, clutching the lantern. Light is light. Not theirs, he said. His voice was heavy, final. Then what keeps them out? She demanded. He studied her for a long time. Distance. Doors. Belief. Her temper snapped. Belief? That's your advice? But he only turned and limped away, leaving her alone in the dust. That afternoon, Evelyn sat by her window, staring at the swing outside. It moved steadily back and forth, though the trees stood still. Once, she thought she saw a figure perched on it, small, hunched, head tilted, but when she blinked, it was gone. The sun bled down. Evening came too fast. By the time the hallway bulbs hummed alive, Evelyn's preparations felt paper-thin. She sat on the bed, eyes locked on the covered mirror, every muscle taut. And when the clock struck 12, the lights gave their first flicker. The bulbs dimmed in unison, their hum stretching into a low whine before cutting off. Darkness smothered the room. Evelyn's chest tightened. She clutched the quilt, eyes fixed on the strip of blanket draped over the mirror. The silence stretched thin, brittle, like glass about to shatter. Then came the first whisper. We know you're awake. Evelyn stiffened. The voice was right beside her ear, though she was alone in the bed. She pressed her hands over her head, willing it away. From the hallway came the sound of feet running, fast, dozens of them, slamming against the boards before stopping at her door. The knob twitched. Scratches raked the wood, faster this time, frantic. Another voice rose, high and coaxing. You don't have to hide. Evelyn bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. She wanted to scream, to tell them to leave her alone, but the caretaker's warning rang in her head, never answer. The chair braced under the doorknob creaked, vibrating with each rattle. Something shoved hard against the door, shaking the dresser. Evelyn gasped but held still, whispering only to herself. They can't come in. They can't come in. From the mirror came a soft thump. Her heart lurched. She turned slowly, dread rising in her throat. The blanket over the frame shifted, pressed outward as though small hands were pushing from the other side. The fabric strained, stretching toward the room. Dozens of whispers rose at once, spilling from beneath the blanket. Open! 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 Evelyn scrambled forward, yanked the quilt from her bed, and hurled it over the mirror, doubling the cover. She pressed her weight against it, trembling. The voices fell silent. The hallway, too, went still. For a long moment, there was nothing but her ragged breathing. Then a single word, so faint it could have been in her head. Soon. The bulbs sputtered back to life, filling the hall with pale yellow glow. Evelyn collapsed on the floor, tears streaking her face. She wasn't sure how many more nights she could survive. Evelyn woke to gray daylight filtering weakly through the curtains. She hadn't meant to fall asleep on the floor, but her body had given out at some point between sobs. Her muscles ached, her throat was raw, and the quilt clung damply to her from sweat. For a long time, she didn't move. She stared at the dresser, the chair, the door with its deepening scars. The gouges were fresher, angrier, splinters littering the floor. When she finally forced herself up, she turned toward the mirror. The 2 blankets hung still over the frame. No bulge, no shifting fabric, no sound. But she couldn't shake the image of small hands pressing out from the glass. She tore the blankets down in a sudden burst of fury, meaning to face it head on. The mirror reflected her, pale, hollow-eyed, hair tangled. But for a fraction of a second, she thought she saw movement behind her reflection, a cluster of blurred shapes, standing shoulder to shoulder. Watching. Her stomach dropped. She flung the blankets back over the mirror and stumbled from the room. The caretaker was in the hall, lantern in hand though daylight filled the corridor. He watched her silently as she staggered toward him. "I can't stay here another night," Evelyn rasped. "I'll lose my mind." His jaw tightened. "Most do." She grabbed his arm, desperation crackling in her voice. "There has to be a way out. You've lived here for years. Don't tell me you've never tried." His eyes flicked to the floorboards. "Tried. Failed. The house shifts the roads, twists the woods. It's a snare. Doesn't matter how far you walk, you come back." Evelyn's grip tightened. "Then we burn it." The caretaker looked up sharply. For the first time, there was something in his eyes besides weariness. Fear. "Don't speak that here," he hissed. "It hears you." From somewhere in the house, a floorboard popped, loud, deliberate, as though in answer. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Evelyn didn't let the caretaker's warning stop her. His silence, his resignation, it felt like surrender. She wasn't ready to give up. After choking down a crust of bread from the kitchen, she grabbed her coat and marched toward the front door. The caretaker followed slowly, leaning heavier on his bad leg. "You won't like what you find," he said. Evelyn ignored him, yanking the door open. The morning was brighter than the last, the mist thinned, but the woods loomed thicker than before. She set her jaw and stepped outside. The mud had hardened in places, enough that she could walk without sinking. She skirted the car, still stuck to its axle in the muck, and followed the rutted track that passed for a road. She walked for 15 minutes. The caretaker shuffled behind at a distance, never calling out, never trying to stop her. The track curved right, dipped slightly, then climbed again. Her chest lifted with hope as she pressed forward. But when she crested the rise, her stomach turned. The guest house stood at the end of the track, exactly where she had begun. Her breath caught. She spun, scanning the trees. "No. I went straight. I didn't turn." The caretaker's voice drifted from behind her. "Doesn't matter. It bends itself." Evelyn's pulse thundered. She tried again, veering left through the trees, branches clawing at her arms. She pushed until her lungs burned. When she broke through a thicket, she found herself standing in the yard again. The swing set creaked in the breeze. Her knees buckled. She staggered back toward the house, rage and despair boiling together. The caretaker stood in the doorway, watching her with hollow eyes. "You see now," he said. Evelyn shoved past him, tears hot on her cheeks. "Then I'll find another way. If the woods and the road won't let me go, I'll tear this place apart from the inside." The house groaned overhead, timbers popping like knuckles. It was listening. Evelyn waited until the caretaker retreated to the parlor before she acted. The house was quiet, the bulbs humming steadily, but her nerves crackled with restless energy. If she couldn't escape outside, she'd find answers inside. The hallway upstairs looked deceptively normal. 6 doors in their proper places, yellow light pooling across warped wallpaper. But Evelyn had seen it change. She knew it could. Her hand hovered over the first doorknob. Room 1. She turned it slowly. Locked. Room 2 locked. Her own door, room 3, sat closed, blankets stuffed beneath to cover the mirror inside. She passed it quickly, refusing to meet the tarnished number plate. Room 4 opened with a creak. Dust swirled in the stale air. The room was bare, just a frame of a bed, no mattress, and an empty dresser. Wallpaper peeled in strips, curling like dead skin. Still, Evelyn stepped inside, heart hammering. At the far wall, she noticed something odd, faint drawings, childlike, scratched into the plaster. Stick figures, dozens of them, holding hands. Above their heads were crude circles, meant to be faces, but the eyes had been gouged out. Her breath caught. She stepped back, bumping the dresser. Its single drawer rattled open an inch. Evelyn froze. Slowly, she pulled it farther. Inside lay a small shoe. Mud-caked. Too small for any adult. The air thickened. She felt watched. A faint laugh tickled her ear. Evelyn whirled. The room was empty. She bolted, slamming the door shut. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she leaned against the wall. The other doors loomed at her, silent, waiting. Her gaze drifted to the end of the hall, the unnumbered door. She hadn't seen it that morning. Yet there it was again, tall and dark, streaked with scratches. The knob glinted faintly in the lamplight. Her stomach nodded. Some part of her wanted, needed, to see what lay behind it. But before she could move, the caretaker's voice cut through the hall, harsh and commanding. "Don't touch that door." Evelyn froze, her hand inches from the knob. The caretaker's voice echoed down the hall, sharper than she'd ever heard it. He was already climbing the stairs, his limp more pronounced in his haste. She turned to face him. "Why? What's behind it?" His expression was grim, pale under the hallway's yellow glow. "Nothing you want to see." "That's not an answer." Her voice cracked with frustration. "I've been scratched at, whispered to, nearly driven insane. If that door has answers, I deserve them." The caretaker's eyes darted to the door, then back to her. For a moment, she thought he might tell her to open it just to see. But instead, his voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. "It isn't a room. It's an opening." Evelyn's pulse stuttered. "An opening to where?" "The dark," he said. "Not night, not shadows, the dark itself. That's where they came from. That's where they belong. Every time the power fails, the house lets them through. This door is their way back and forth." Evelyn's skin crawled. She glanced at the scratches gouged into the wood, the way the knob seemed faintly slick with moisture, as though touched too many times by cold hands. "Then why keep it locked?" she demanded. His jaw tightened. "Because the lock is all that keeps them from pouring out. As long as it holds, they need you to invite them." His voice dropped lower. "But if the lock breaks..." The words trailed off. Evelyn didn't need him to finish. Her throat constricted as she looked again at the door, imagining dozens of small, pale hands clawing it open. The caretaker stepped closer, his limp dragging. "Promise me you won't touch it." Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came. Because even now, even knowing what he'd said, she felt the door pulling at her. As though something on the other side was waiting specifically for her hand. Evelyn tried to keep her promise. She really did. She stayed in room 3 for the rest of the afternoon, the mirror hidden beneath its heavy shroud, her body taut with exhaustion. She told herself she would not walk the hall again, would not even look toward the end where the unnumbered door waited. But as the sun sank, her thoughts circled back to it. Every creak of the house, every distant giggle seemed to draw her mind down that hallway. By the time the bulbs flickered to life, she felt certain she could hear something faint beneath their hum, a steady knocking, slow and patient, coming from behind the locked door. The caretaker passed by with his lantern. He glanced at her room, saw the dresser braced against the door, and gave a short nod. "Stay in tonight. Whatever you hear, whatever they promise, ignore it." Evelyn wanted to ask him how many times he had ignored them, how many nights he'd endured this madness, but the words caught in her throat. She simply nodded, and he moved on. Midnight came. The lights died. The laughter rose at once, closer than before, echoing not just from the hall but from the walls of her room, as if the house itself giggled. Small feet pattered outside her door. Fingernails raked the wood higher, deeper, splintering the fresh scars. And then the whispers shifted, no longer at her door but drifting from down the hall, sweet and coaxing. "Evelyn! Evelyn, come see us!" Her blood iced. They had never spoken her name before. She pressed her hands to her ears, rocking on the bed, repeating to herself, "Not real! Not real!" But the voices swelled, overlapping, hundreds of little mouths calling her name. The air grew cold, the quilt stiff in her grip. Then came the sound she dreaded most, the click of a lock turning. Her head snapped toward the door at the far end of the hall. She couldn't see it, not through the dark, but she knew. The unnumbered door had shifted, and something inside was pushing it open. The air in the hallway changed. Evelyn could feel it through the cracks of her door, thicker, colder, as though the oxygen itself were being pulled away. From the far end came a groan of wood and metal, slow and deliberate, like a lock straining. Then, a faint squeal of hinges. The unnumbered door was moving. The voices hushed all at once, a silence more terrifying than their laughter. She held her breath, ears straining. In that void she heard it, a sound like 100 nails dragging across stone. Not at her door now, but spilling from the black throat of that opening. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She ripped the chair from under her doorknob, shoved the dresser aside, and yanked the door open. The hallway was pitch dark, yet she could see it, an outline at the far end, the unnumbered door gaping just an inch. From that narrow crack, something pale and thin writhed, pressing outward. "Close it," Evelyn whispered to herself. Her legs shook as she stumbled forward, one hand scraping along the wall for balance. The moment her foot hit the hallway, the children's voices returned, this time screaming. Not playful, not coaxing. Rage. Dozens of tiny fists pounded against the other doors, rattling knobs, slamming wood. Evelyn clamped her hands over her ears and forced herself onward. The air grew colder with each step, her breath fogging. The unnumbered door shuddered under unseen hands. The lock strained, metal groaning. Through the widening crack, Evelyn glimpsed something impossible, a place with no walls, no floor, only a void alive with movement. Dozens of small shapes pressed against the threshold, faces white and eyeless, mouths open in silent hunger. Her knees buckled. She nearly collapsed, but the caretaker's warning cut through her mind like a blade, if the lock breaks. Summoning strength she didn't know she had, Evelyn lunged forward and slammed her palm against the wood. The door jolted, the lock snapping back into place with a final, angry click. The voices shrieked, shaking the house itself, then fell silent. Evelyn staggered back down the hall, slamming herself inside room 3. She pressed her back to the door, trembling violently, her breath rasping. In the sudden quiet, the caretaker's voice called faintly from below. "You touched it, didn't you?" The house was still trembling when Evelyn forced herself down the stairs. Every step groaned louder than it should, as if the boards resented her weight. The caretaker sat in the parlor, lantern flickering at his side. His face was grim, his hands clasped tight in his lap. He didn't look up when she entered. "You touched it," he said again, voice flat. Evelyn's throat ached from holding back screams. "It was opening. I had to close it." At that, his eyes finally met hers. For the first time, she saw fear in them, not for himself, but for her. "And what did you see?" She swallowed hard. "Shapes. Faces. A void like the dark itself was alive." He pressed his hands harder together until his knuckles whitened. "Then they've chosen you." Her stomach dropped. "Chosen me for what?" "For crossing over." Evelyn staggered back, shaking her head. No, I shut it. I kept them in." He gave a hollow laugh. "The lock kept them in. Always has. But now they know your touch. The door will open for you easier next time." Her chest tightened. "So I doomed myself by saving us?" The caretaker's face sagged with exhaustion. This house doesn't want survivors. It wants keepers. I've held them back for years, as my father did before me. But I'm old, and you've already answered their whispers. You've already touched their door. The words struck like blows. You mean I'm meant to take your place? Not meant. Trapped. Silence pressed in. The lantern flame sputtered, as though straining for air. Evelyn's voice cracked as she whispered, "There has to be another way." The caretaker's gaze softened, just barely. "If there is, I never found it." Above them, a door slammed shut with a violence that shook the walls. Both of them flinched. The caretaker closed his eyes. "They're restless now. Tonight will be worse." Evelyn's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She spent the morning tearing through her room, searching for anything that might give her an edge. She dragged the quilt tighter across the mirror, wedged the dresser back against the door, and scavenged the drawers for anything sharp. The best she found was a rusted letter opener, its edge dull but pointed enough to make her feel less helpless. She thought about running again, about charging into the woods until her legs gave out, but the memory of circling back, always back, made bile rise in her throat. The house had her, and it wasn't letting go. By mid-afternoon, she wandered into the caretaker's quarters. The door was ajar, though she'd never seen him leave it open before. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and dust. Papers littered the table, yellowed with age. Some were ledgers, but others were journals, handwriting jagged, desperate. She skimmed the closest page. They whispered again tonight. I nearly answered. Father says the trick is not to think of them as children. Not anymore. But when they laugh, it's the same laugh my sister had. Another entry. The door at the hall grew wider this week. I think it listens when I pass. It knows I'll falter soon. Evelyn's skin crawled. These weren't just the caretaker's words. Some entries went back decades, written in different hands, but always about the same things: whispers, scratches, the unnumbered door. A lineage of keepers, each slowly unraveling. The caretaker appeared in the doorway, his lantern light cutting through her guilt. His eyes lingered on the journals, then on her. You see now, he said softly. The house doesn't let us go. It keeps us until we break. Then it finds another. Evelyn's throat tightened. I won't be its next. The caretaker studied her for a long moment, then shook his head. You don't get to choose. Thunder rolled outside, though the sky had been clear an hour before. The house groaned in its beams, preparing itself. Night was coming early. By dusk, the storm had swallowed the sky. Rain hammered the roof in sheets, drowning out almost every other sound. Thunder cracked so close the walls rattled, and the bulbs in the hallway buzzed with a frantic, high-pitched whine. Evelyn sat on the bed, the journals spread across her lap. The words blurred, not from age but from her own tears. Generations of keepers, each one writing the same warnings, the same pleas. And every page ended the same: silence. No last entry, just absence. The caretaker shuffled past her door with his lantern. He paused long enough to mutter, Brace yourself. Then he moved on, as if his words were farewell. Midnight came early. The bulbs flared so bright they seared her vision, then died all at once. The house erupted. Children's laughter shrieked from every direction, overlapping, discordant, a chorus of madness. Doors slammed open and shut in rapid succession, though Evelyn knew no locks had been turned. The floorboards buckled under invisible feet. Her dresser rattled against the door. The mirror bulged beneath its quilt, the fabric trembling as though fists pounded from within. Evelyn! Dozens of voices cried at once. Come play! She pressed the letter opener to her chest, whispering frantically, Not real, not real, not real! But the voices didn't fade. They grew sharper, crueler. You touched the door. You belong to us. The air thickened until she struggled to breathe. Her lungs felt pressed flat, her vision spotted. She stumbled from the bed and ripped the blankets from the mirror, desperate to face it. The glass shimmered with pale light. Behind her reflection, children crowded shoulder to shoulder, their faces stretched in silent screams. Hands slapped against the inside of the glass. Cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, each one echoing like a gunshot. Evelyn screamed and threw the quilt back over it, collapsing to her knees. From the hallway came a sound worse than all the rest, the unnumbered doors locked snapping open. The storm outside roared louder, as if the sky itself were being torn in half. The sound of the lock breaking echoed through the entire house. Evelyn clamped her hands over her ears, but the metallic crack reverberated in her chest, her bones, her teeth. The voices fell silent for one impossible moment, as though even they were holding their breath. Then came the groan of the hinges. The unnumbered door was opening. She tore the quilt tighter over the mirror, as if that would shield her, but the pull of the hallway was undeniable. The air itself seemed to drag at her, tugging her body toward the crack at the far end. Her dresser skidded across the floor despite its weight. The chair rattled against the knob. The entire room leaned toward the open door as though gravity itself had shifted. "Evelyn!" The voices sang together, soft now, almost tender. "It's time!" She staggered forward, the letter opener trembling in her hand. "No!" Her voice cracked, swallowed immediately by thunder. A sudden pounding rattled her own door, desperate, human. The caretaker's voice, hoarse with terror. "Don't move! Don't let it see you!" But Evelyn's feet kept sliding across the boards. She fell against the wall, dug her nails into the peeling wallpaper, tried to anchor herself. Every shadow stretched toward the hallway, thin arms clawing at her ankles. She forced her head to turn, though she knew she shouldn't. The unnumbered door yawned wide at the end of the corridor, its wood trembling, lock useless. Beyond it was no room, no structure, only a swirling dark expanse alive with movement. Shapes writhed inside, pale limbs wriggling against one another like worms in soil. Faces bloomed and vanished in the void, their mouths opening in silent howls. One by one, they began stepping through. Small, childlike, eyeless. Their heads turned toward her, and though no mouths moved, she heard the whisper in her mind. "You opened it for us." Her grip faltered. The caretaker's fist slammed against her door. "Evelyn! Fight it!" But the house groaned in triumph, as if welcoming its newest keeper into the dark. Evelyn's nails tore strips from the wallpaper as her body slid across the floor. The pull was irresistible, like the air itself had turned into a tide dragging her out to sea. Her chest heaved, throat raw from screaming. The hallway stretched before her, longer than she had ever seen it, impossibly long, every bulb extinguished. At the far end, the unnumbered door gaped wide, and from it poured a wind that reeked of earth and rot, the stink of something buried too long. The children poured through. Their pale forms stumbled into the hall, twitching, heads lolling. Their eyeless faces tilted toward her, and though no lips moved, the voices thundered inside her skull. "Keep her! Keep her! Keep her!" She clawed at the floor, fingers splintering on the boards. "No! I'm not yours!" The caretaker's fists pounded her door again, the sound nearly drowned by the storm and the voices. "Evelyn! Listen to me! They can't take you unless you let them!" Her body jerked forward another foot. Her shoulder slammed against the doorframe, pain shooting down her arm. "I'm not letting them!" she screamed back. But even as she shouted, the first of the pale figures reached her. Small hands gripped her ankles, cold, slick, impossibly strong. She kicked, sobbing, but more hands joined, climbing her legs, clutching at her clothes. The letter opener slipped from her grasp, clattering across the floor. The pull grew stronger. She was dragged into the hall, her fingernails shredding as she fought. The figures swarmed her, their whispering a chorus that rattled her skull. "Keep her! Keep her! Keep her!" Her head snapped up. At the far end, in the void, a shape larger than the rest stirred. Taller, hunched, its arms too long. Its faceless head turned toward her. The caretaker's voice roared above the storm. "Don't say yes! Whatever they ask, don't!" The voices cut him off, rising in unison, filling her with a terrible sweetness. "Say the word! Be ours! And in that moment, Evelyn felt her lips part against her will. The pull was relentless, dragging Evelyn inch by inch toward the gaping door. The pale children clung to her like anchors, their cold fingers digging into her skin, leaving bruises where they gripped. Her throat worked against her will, shaping the syllables they begged her to say. Why? She clamped her teeth shut so hard her jaw popped. Blood filled her mouth where she bit her tongue. She tasted iron and forced the word back down. The children shrieked, a sound that shook the walls and split the air. Some laughed, some cried, their voices overlapping in a chaos that made her vision blur. Say it. Say it. Say it. Her fingers snagged something, the fallen letter opener. She curled her hand around it, digging the point into her palm until pain sharpened her mind. No! She screamed, the word tearing from her chest. The hallway shook violently. Doors slammed open and shut. The mirror in her room cracked beneath its covering, spiderwebbing glass. The unnumbered door yawned wider, the void pulsing with hunger. The tall figure stirred again, stepping closer. Its limbs dragged against the frame, scraping, its faceless head tilting in an imitation of curiosity. Its voice entered her skull alone, deeper than the children's, resonant as thunder. You are mine already. Why fight? Her tears blurred her sight. Because I'm not yours. The caretaker's voice bellowed down the hall, raw with desperation. Use your name. Say who you are. It weakens them. Evelyn gasped, her lungs aching. The children's chorus screamed in her skull, trying to drown his words. But she forced her mouth open, forced her tongue around the weight of her own voice. My name is Evelyn. Evelyn Ward. The effect was immediate. The hands clutching her legs recoiled, smoking as though burned. The voices shrieked, scattering like startled birds. The pull weakened, just slightly, but enough. Evelyn scrambled backward, dragging herself across the boards until her back hit her doorframe. She slammed inside, gasping, and shoved the dresser against it with the last of her strength. The house roared in fury, but the door held. For now. The house eventually quieted, though the storm outside did not. Evelyn sat slumped against the dresser, chest heaving, her palms slick with sweat and blood. The echo of the voices still crawled through her head, but she clung to the memory of the moment they recoiled. Her name. Speaking it had pushed them back. She repeated it under her breath like a prayer. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. Each time, her heartbeat steadied a little more. When she dared to move, she crept into the hallway. The bulbs sputtered, half of them burned out, but the corridor was empty. The unnumbered door was closed again, its lock crooked and bent as though barely holding. The caretaker waited at the top of the stairs, lantern light making deep hollows in his face. He studied her, his expression unreadable. You lasted, he said quietly. Evelyn's voice cracked. You knew. You knew names had power. Why didn't you tell me sooner? His eyes dropped. Because most who try it don't last long enough for it to matter. She clenched her fists. They called me keeper. They wanted me to say yes. What does that mean? The caretaker limped closer, his gaze dark. It means the house chose you. It always chooses one. Someone to hold it together, to keep the doors shut, until they fail. Then it takes them. Evelyn's throat tightened. That's you now. Isn't it? He gave a thin smile with no humor. Until you arrived. She staggered back. I don't want this. I'm not staying here. You think I did? His voice rose, ragged. I screamed in those woods, I ran the road till my feet bled, I begged anyone who passed. But once the house marks you, there is no leaving. Evelyn's breath shook, but she gripped the letter opener tighter, refusing to let despair choke her. Then I'll fight it. If my name weakens them, I'll use it until I tear this house down. The caretaker's eyes flicked toward the unnumbered door. Careful. The dark doesn't fear you for long. It learns. From behind the crooked lock, a single knock echoed, deliberate, waiting. Morning felt dishonest, as if the sun were thin paper taped over a wound. Evelyn moved like a sleepwalker, clutching the rusted letter opener and stepping lightly through the house as if any clatter might wake the dark beneath the boards. The unnumbered door at the hall's end sat shut, the lock crooked and angry. It made the house look like a mouth closed over a secret. She found the caretaker in the parlor, hunched over one of the old journals, his lantern long since banked. He didn't look surprised to see her. The lines on his face had been carved by many sleepless mornings. "We need something," Evelyn said. "A tool. A key. Anything that will keep that lock from giving." He stared at her for a long time, as though weighing whether to hand over the last thin strand of hope. Finally he rose, joints complaining, and gestured toward a narrow door beneath the stairs. "The cellar," he said. "If there's anything left from before, iron, chains, old bolts, it'll be there." The cellar smelled of damp and memory. Light from the single bulb swung weakly as they descended. Evelyn's hand brushed against crates of bottles, moth-eaten rugs, and a long coil of chain that looked like it had been through years of storms. At the back, half buried under a collapsed shelf, something metallic flashed. She pulled. It came free with a groan, a heavy iron hasp, long and pitted with rust. The caretaker ran a trembling hand over it. "This used to lock the back sheds. Sturdy once." Evelyn held it like a talisman. It was ugly and ordinary and felt, absurdly, like defiance. "Could we use it on the door?" she asked. "Replace the lock, make it something bigger, stronger?" He blinked. "Maybe." Hope sounded foreign in his mouth. He disappeared into a corner of the cellar and returned with a coil of thick wire and a battered hand drill that had probably not seen a working battery in decades. "I don't know if the house will let you do anything to it," he admitted. "It doesn't like being messed with." They hauled the iron up the stairs together, their breaths fogging the dim hallway. As they worked, jamming the hasp against the door, wrapping the wire, bracing a length of chain across the frame, the house watched. The bulbs hummed uncertainly, then steadied. For a moment the corridor was ordinary wood and brass and sweat. Evelyn pressed her forehead against the cold metal and whispered her name like a vow. "Evelyn Ward." When they finished, the hasp sat awkward and ugly on the unnumbered door, a stubborn wedge between the house and the dark beyond. It would not stop the void forever, she knew that deep in her bones, but it might buy them nights. Minutes, maybe hours. The caretaker found another journal and, for the first time since she'd known him, read aloud. The handwriting was cramped, older. "Names are anchors. Iron helps, but not always. If the keeper falters, say the full name thrice. If the house learns your name, say it louder still." Evelyn's breath hitched. The journals were not only records, they were instructions, half remembered and scratched in panic. Knowledge. A small, dangerous kind of hope. Outside, the wind picked up. The swing creaked in slow, patient arcs. In the hall, the unnumbered door sat stubborn and bound. Night would come, and with it the pull. But this time she had iron, a brace, and the taste of a weapon she could speak. She practiced her name until her throat hurt, the syllables sharpening into armor. As dusk bled back over the trees, the caretaker looked at her with something like apology and resolve. "You understand, if this breaks, it'll break fast," he said. "We may be buying time." Evelyn swallowed and nodded. She hefted the rusted hasp as if it were a blade. "Then we fight until it does." At the far end of the hall, something knocked, not on the locked door, but on the house itself. 3 slow, deliberate taps, spaced like a countdown. The storm didn't wait for midnight. By the time the sun slid behind the trees, thunder was already crawling across the sky, and the bulbs in the hallway hummed like hornets. Evelyn stood in the corridor with the caretaker, both of them staring at the crooked lock bound by iron and chain. "Will it hold?" she asked. The caretaker didn't answer at first. He touched the hasp with one gnarled hand, listening as though the metal might whisper back. Finally, he shook his head. "It might. For a night." A night. That was all she could ask for. They returned to their rooms. Evelyn barricaded her door with the dresser and the chair, then sat cross-legged on the bed, whispering her name into the storm until her throat burned. Evelyn Ward! Evelyn Ward! Evelyn Ward! The house groaned in reply, its beams shifting like bones. At 11:59, the lights surged once, twice, then snapped out. The laughter came immediately. Not playful this time, but furious, jagged. Nails tore at every door, rattled every knob. From the far end of the hall, the chain screamed under pressure, metal scraping against metal as something slammed against the unnumbered door. The caretaker shouted over the storm. "Say it! Say it now!" Evelyn rose from the bed, trembling, and shouted her name until the walls shook. "Evelyn Ward! Evelyn Ward!" The children's voices recoiled, hissing, though they did not vanish. The chain across the unnumbered door rattled harder, harder, as if the house itself tried to tear through iron. The lock screeched but held. From her mirror came a crack, glass splitting down the center. Pale hands pressed against it, warping the fabric she'd nailed over. Evelyn staggered forward, palms slick with sweat, and screamed her name again. "I am Evelyn Ward!" For a heartbeat, silence. The laughter paused. The mirror stilled. Even the storm held its breath. Then, low and resonant, the deeper voice rolled through her skull like thunder. "Not for long!" The chain on the unnumbered door snapped tight, straining. The hasp bent. Evelyn pressed her back to her own door, whispering her name over and over, knowing each repetition might be her last defense. The house wasn't just listening anymore. It was learning. The rattling of the chain grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards. Each slam against the unnumbered door sent tremors through the hallway, knocking dust from the ceiling. Evelyn pressed her ear to her own door and heard the metal scream, the hasp bending one desperate groan at a time. The caretaker's voice carried faintly from the hall, hoarse with effort. "Hold, damn you! Hold!" Evelyn wanted to open her door, to help, but fear rooted her. What could she possibly do against the force that had crushed generations? Still, the sound of him straining alone, the lantern light flickering against her threshold, tore at her. She shoved the dresser aside and cracked the door. The hallway was chaos. Bulbs overhead flickered madly, light strobing, throwing the caretaker's hunched form into jerking shadows. He clung to the chain, his whole body braced, as though his weight alone could pin it shut. "Back inside!" he barked when he saw her. "It's not your fight yet." But it was. Evelyn knew it. The house had chosen her. The unnumbered door bulged outward, the frame groaning as if it would splinter. From the crack seeped darkness, not shadow, not absence of light, but a substance alive and pulsing. It rolled across the floor in tendrils, reaching toward their feet. Evelyn shouted her name, voice cracking, and the tendrils recoiled with a hiss. The caretaker's eyes widened. "Keep doing that!" She screamed it again, louder, until her throat burned. "Evelyn Ward!" The chain jerked violently, snapping one link. The caretaker stumbled, lantern crashing to the floor and sputtering out. The hall plunged into near darkness, lit only by the erratic glow of the failing bulbs. The children's voices surged, shrieking, "Keep her! Keep her! Keep her!" Their laughter blended with weeping, a cacophony that rattled the boards. The caretaker clung to the last of the chain. His voice was a ragged whisper. "If it opens, don't let them drag me in. Do you understand? Don't let them take me." Evelyn's breath froze. "What?" The door slammed again, harder, and the second link snapped. The hasp was about to give. The final link screamed like an animal before it tore apart. The sound cut through Evelyn's bones. With a metallic crack, the chain flung loose and rattled across the hallway floor like a serpent. The unnumbered door burst open. Darkness poured out, not like smoke or shadow but like liquid night, thick, writhing, alive. It spilled across the boards, climbing the walls, swallowing the yellow glow of the bulbs. Evelyn's breath hitched as the light shrank and shrank until only the door itself gleamed faintly, a black mouth vomiting the void. Shapes crawled through. Dozens at first, small, childlike, twitching. Their eyeless faces turned toward her, heads jerking at impossible angles. Their mouths hung open in silent shrieks, but their voices thundered directly into her skull. Keeper! 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 The caretaker staggered back, his lantern broken at his feet. His face was pale, lips trembling. Not yet, not me! One of the pale children lunged for him, hands clawing. Evelyn screamed her name, and the figure recoiled, hissing, but more swarmed forward. The sound of her voice wasn't enough anymore. They had learned to weather it. Then came the tall figure. It stepped through the threshold with grotesque slowness, its limbs scraping along the frame. Taller than any man, its arms stretched almost to the floor. Its head was faceless, smooth as polished bone, yet somehow it stared directly at her. The caretaker fell to his knees. God help us, he whispered. The figure tilted its head, and a deep voice filled the hall, vibrating in Evelyn's ribs. You shut us out too long. Now we take what is ours. Evelyn's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the letter opener. She forced herself forward, planting her body between the caretaker and the advancing horde. Her throat burned as she screamed again. I am Evelyn Ward! The children faltered for a heartbeat, just enough to make space. But the tall figure only leaned closer, its presence crushing the air around her. Her voice cracked. You can't have me! The faceless head tilted. Its voice came low and certain. You are already ours. The tall figure's presence was suffocating. Every breath Evelyn took felt stolen, as though the thing drew oxygen from the air before it reached her lungs. Her knees buckled under the weight of its gaze, though it had no eyes. Behind it, the children spilled into the hall, dozens of them crowding shoulder to shoulder. Their pale hands flexed eager, waiting for a single word from her lips. The caretaker crawled backward along the boards, his hands leaving streaks of sweat and grime. Evelyn, he rasped. It won't stop. Not unless... He broke off with a shudder. Not unless what? She demanded. But his answer was drowned out by the thunderous voice in her skull. Say yes. The tall figure extended one grotesque arm, its hand stretching until it nearly scraped the floor. It pointed at her chest with a finger that seemed too long, too sharp. Keeper! 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 Evelyn's pulse hammered. Her name burned on her tongue, but the effect was waning. Their bodies no longer recoiled when she spoke it, only flinched. She needed more than her voice. Her fingers tightened around the rusted letter opener. She raised it high, the metal glinting in the stuttering bulb light. You don't own me! She screamed. The children shrieked in reply, a sound that made her vision blur. They surged forward as one, small bodies lunging. Evelyn slashed with the opener, connecting with a pale wrist. To her shock, the figure recoiled, black smoke seeping from the wound. The other shrieked, drawing back. Her chest heaved. Iron! She gasped. It hurts them. The caretaker lurched to his feet, grabbing the broken chain. He swung it wildly, and the nearest figures hissed, retreating to the walls. For the first time, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. She brandished the opener like a blade, shouting her name with each step forward. Evelyn Ward! Evelyn Ward! The tall figure did not retreat. It leaned closer, the smooth surface of its face splitting slightly, revealing a mouth that was no mouth at all, a void opening into deeper void. From that abyss came a whisper only she could hear. Names burn, but names fade. We will teach you to forget. Evelyn staggered, clutching her head as if the voice could split her skull. Her name wavered on her lips, slipping away even as she tried to form it. And she realized with cold terror. The house was trying to erase her. The tall figure's whisper burrowed deep, curling inside Evelyn's mind like smoke. With every word, her thoughts blurred, her name slipping like water through cupped hands. Who are you? The voice asked. She opened her mouth, desperate to answer, but the syllables caught in her throat. Ev. Her chest seized. Terror coiled in her gut. The children chanted louder, stamping their feet, pounding the walls. Keeper! 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 Their voices fused with the storm, a rhythm that drowned out her own thoughts. The caretaker staggered toward her, swinging the broken chain. "Don't let it take your name!" he shouted, his voice raw. "Speak it! Carve it in yourself if you have to!" The chain connected with one of the pale figures, sending it sprawling with a hiss. Smoke curled from its skin. The others shrank back, but the tall figure did not move. It leaned closer, its mouthless void gaping wider. "No one remembers you," it whispered. "No one will speak for you. Let it go. You are nothing." Evelyn dropped to her knees, clutching her skull. Images flickered, her mother's smile, the books on her shelf at home, the smell of her favorite tea. All slipping, all dissolving. She stabbed the letter opener into her palm. Pain tore a scream from her throat, sharp and grounding. Blood welled hot between her fingers. Through the haze, she forced the sound out. "My name." She gagged on the syllables, but pushed harder. "My name is Evelyn Ward." The void face flinched. The children shrieked, scattering along the walls like startled insects. She pressed the blade deeper into her hand, anchoring herself to the pain. She shouted until her voice cracked, until her throat burned raw. "Evelyn Ward! Evelyn Ward!" The house roared back, beams shuddering, glass shattering in nearby rooms. The mirror in her chamber exploded behind its shroud, raining shards across the floor. The tall figure reeled but did not retreat. Its void mouth twisted into something like a smile. "You will not last." And with a sound like tearing fabric, it surged forward. The tall figure lunged, its arms whipping forward with impossible speed. Evelyn rolled aside as its elongated fingers raked deep gouges into the floorboards where she'd been kneeling. The sound was like knives carving wood. The caretaker swung the broken chain in a wide arc. The iron links cracked against one of the figure's limbs, and a hiss filled the hallway, thick smoke billowing where the metal struck. The thing recoiled, but only for a heartbeat before straightening again. "Keep shouting!" the caretaker barked. "It slows them." Evelyn forced air into her burning throat. "Evelyn Ward!" she screamed, staggering back to her feet. The children crowding the walls shuddered, some melting into the plaster, others collapsing into heaps that smoked and dissolved. But the tall figure only tilted its faceless head, its void mouth stretching wider. "Evelyn Ward!" it echoed, mocking her with her own voice. Already fading. Her knees buckled. The sound of her name twisted wrong, stolen, perverted. She clutched her bleeding palm around the letter opener and charged. With a desperate cry, she drove the iron blade into its chest. The hallway erupted with sound. The figure convulsed, its arms thrashing so violently the walls cracked. Black fluid hissed around the blade, burning her wrist where it touched. Evelyn screamed in pain but held on, forcing the metal deeper. The children shrieked, scattering like leaves in a storm. Some clawed at the door frames, others tore at their own skin as though trying to peel away from the house itself. The caretaker lunged in beside her, wrapping the chain around the figure's limbs, yanking tight. His face contorted with effort, veins bulging in his neck. "Push it back!" he roared. Evelyn screamed her name again and again, every syllable tearing her throat. "Evelyn Ward! Evelyn Ward!" The figure stumbled, its void mouth shrieking with a sound that was not sound at all but pressure, like the air itself being ripped apart. For one impossible moment, it tottered at the threshold of the unnumbered door, chain biting into its limbs, iron searing its chest. And then, with a final heave, Evelyn and the caretaker shoved together. The tall figure crashed backward into the dark. The unnumbered door slammed shut. Silence slammed down over the house as the unnumbered door shut. The storm outside faltered, rain dwindling to a weak drizzle. For the first time in days, the laughter stopped. No scratching at the walls, no rattling knobs. Only the sound of Evelyn's ragged breaths and the caretaker's wheezing coughs. She collapsed against the wall, her bloody hands still clenched around the letter opener. Her throat burned raw from screaming her name. Every muscle trembled as if she'd run miles. The caretaker slumped to the floor, chains slipping from his grasp. His hands shook uncontrollably. "Iron held," he rasped. "For now." Evelyn turned toward the unnumbered door. The crooked lock hung by a single screw, warped nearly beyond use. The hasp they'd added was bent, wires frayed. She knew, deep in her bones, that it wouldn't hold again. "We didn't stop it," she whispered. "We just slowed it." The caretaker's eyes lifted to hers, and in them she saw both resignation and relief. "That's all anyone's ever done." Evelyn shook her head, anger piercing through her exhaustion. "No. There has to be a way to end this. To destroy it, not just keep it at bay." The caretaker laughed, a dry, broken sound. "You think I haven't tried? Fire, salt, prayer, it all feeds it. The house doesn't burn. The door doesn't break. We don't end it." He coughed, clutching his chest. "We endure it." His words struck her harder than the figure's claws. Endure. That was what the journals had said too. A cycle of keepers, each one devoured when they faltered. She looked at him, frail and slumped, and realized the truth. He wouldn't last much longer. The house knew it. And so did he. "You're leaving it to me," she said. Not a question. His eyes closed slowly. "It already chose you." Evelyn pressed her bloody palm against the floor, forcing herself upright. Her name burned in her throat, but she spoke it again, louder this time, as though to stamp it into the walls. "I am Evelyn Ward, and I'm not staying here." The house creaked above her, beams popping, as if amused. From behind the unnumbered door came a faint knock. 3 slow raps, patient, deliberate. The caretaker flinched. Evelyn didn't. Not anymore. Evelyn didn't sleep. She couldn't. Instead, she sat at the caretaker's desk in the parlor, stacks of journals spread before her. Their pages reeked of mildew, ink blurred by damp, but each was written in the same desperate hand: keep them out. Endure the night. Pass the burden. Some were older, the handwriting jagged, half-faded, belonging to people long dead. Others were written by the caretaker himself. She flipped through one, dated only 5 years back. "The door grows restless. It whispers of names I no longer remember. Perhaps that is how it wins, when the sound of your own self slips away." Another entry, decades older. "Iron weakens them, names repel them. But both falter in time. The only thing they fear is forgetting us in turn. If the keeper could leave a mark stronger than the house itself, carved, written, sung, perhaps the dark would have no claim." Evelyn sat back, her heart pounding. A mark stronger than the house. She thought of the mirror splintering when she screamed her name, the way the children shrieked when iron struck them. If names anchored her, maybe they could anchor the house too, pin it to her, instead of letting it drift back into that void. She began tearing scraps of paper, writing her name over and over until the nib of the caretaker's pen split. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. She pinned them to the walls, shoved them under door frames, stuffed them in the cracks of the floorboards. She carved her name into the dresser with the letter opener, into the bed frame, even into her own arm when her voice faltered. The caretaker watched her from the doorway, face pale. "You think words will save you? They're all we have," she snapped, her voice shaking. "If my name keeps them out, then I'll bury this house in it." He said nothing, only lowered himself into the chair by the fire and closed his eyes. His breath came shallow, rattling. Evelyn wondered if he'd survive another night. She wrote until her hand cramped, until ink stained her fingers black. The house creaked above her, floorboards groaning, as if restless with her defiance. When the storm clouds thickened again and the bulbs began to flicker, she pressed her bloody palm to the journal and whispered, "I am Evelyn Ward, and you will remember me." From the hallway came a hiss, like laughter choked down. The unnumbered door rattled its chains. By the time the clock struck midnight, the house was plastered with her name. Scraps of paper pinned into cracks, letters carved into wood, her blood pressed into the dresser drawers. The sight of it should have steadied her, but as the bulbs winked out, she realized how fragile ink looked in the dark. The voices came immediately. 1,000 whispers, layered and crawling, seeping through the walls. They did not start with laughter this time. They started with her name. "Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. Each repetition was a mockery, as though they were spitting it back at her. The house rattled with the sound, the boards quivering under the weight of her stolen name. She pressed both hands against her ears and screamed at herself, trying to drown them out. Evelyn Ward! Her voice scraped raw, but the walls seemed to pulse in answer. The mirror in the room quivered under its shroud, glass cracking anew. This time the hands pressing outward were blackened, burned, as though her carvings seared them. They shrieked in unison, a high-pitched wail that rattled the window panes. From the hallway came the caretaker's voice, weak but present. It's working! Keep at it! Evelyn tore the shroud from the mirror. The reflection was a storm of faces, white and eyeless, screaming. Her own name scrawled across the glass in trembling handwriting, as if it had written itself. I am Evelyn Ward, she shouted into it. You don't own me! The mirror cracked in half. Shards rained across the floor, each one glowing faintly with her name carved inside. The children recoiled from the broken pieces, hissing, their small forms flickering like shadows against the walls. But then came the deeper voice, smooth and certain, rising from the unnumbered door. Names fade. Ink fades. Blood fades. The house remembers longer than you. The chains rattled violently, the hasp bowing outward. Darkness seeped through the cracks, curling across the hallway floor. Evelyn braced herself, gripping the blood-stained letter opener. She stood among the shards of the shattered mirror, her own name etched across them like weapons. Then I'll make you choke on mine, she hissed. The house roared in fury. The shards of mirror glowed faintly in the dark, her name scrawled across each one in shaky, luminous script. Evelyn snatched a jagged piece from the floor, clutching it so tightly the edges cut her palm. Blood smeared the letters, but the glow didn't fade. The children circled her room like a storm of pale shadows. Each time one lunged, she slashed the shard through the air, and they shrieked, retreating to the walls. For a moment, she dared to believe she had the upper hand. Then the deeper voice filled the room. You gave us your name. Now we keep it. Evelyn froze. The glow on the shard flickered. The letters warped, reshaping themselves. Where it once read Evelyn Ward, the words twisted, scrambled, until nothing remained but smudges of black. The other shards followed. Her name bled away, vanishing from the glass, from the papers on the walls, from the carvings in the wood. Every mark she had left began to fade as though the house were swallowing them whole. No, she whispered, her chest seizing. She clawed at the dresser where she'd carved it with the opener, empty wood. No mark. No proof she had ever been. The caretaker's voice rose from the hall, hoarse with panic. Fight it, Evelyn! Say it! Say your name before it erases you! Her lips parted, but the sound wouldn't come. The syllables slipped from her mind like sand from her fingers. Who was she? What had she carved, written, screamed? The children's laughter swelled. They chanted not her name now, but nothing at all, garbled syllables, meaningless sounds that filled her head with static. She dropped to her knees, pressing the shard against her temple, desperate for the glow to return. Her throat closed. Sweat drenched her skin. Her name hovered just out of reach, like a word on the tip of her tongue. The tall figure's shadow spilled through the cracks of the unnumbered door. Its void mouth whispered one final taunt. Without your name, you are ours. And Evelyn felt her identity unravel, thread by thread. The syllables slipped like oil through Evelyn's mind. She tried to shape them with her mouth, but each attempt ended in a choking stutter. The children shrieked in delight, their small hands beating the walls like drums. The sound shook her ribs. The caretaker's voice carried faintly from the hall, ragged but urgent. Anchor yourself! Find something that belongs to you! Her gaze darted across the room. The shards, the papers, the wood, all blank now. Every trace of her name stolen. The house whispered louder, filling her skull with static. You are nothing. You are ours. You were never anyone at all. Her knees buckled. She pressed her bloody palm to her chest, shaking, searching. Something. Anything. And then, her mother's voice. Not the phantom whispers of the house, but memory. A quiet lullaby, sung softly at her bedside when storms frightened her as a child. The melody rose in her throat, trembling, then steadied. She sang it. Weak at first, but then louder. The words were nonsense, half forgotten, but they belonged to her. The whispers recoiled, hissing. The children screeched, their bodies warping, shrinking into shadows. Her throat burned as she forced her voice louder. I am, she gagged, pressed harder. I am Evelyn Ward. The name burst from her lips like fire. The shards on the floor blazed again, her name scrawled across them in light. The wood on the dresser smoked, letters reappearing in black scorches. The house groaned in fury, the walls trembling as if struck by an earthquake. The unnumbered door slammed against its frame, chains rattling wildly. From the void, the tall figure's roar thundered through the hall, shaking dust from the ceiling. But her name was back. It seared the air. I am Evelyn Ward, she screamed, thrusting the shard toward the door. The glow flared, slicing through the darkness like lightning. The children vanished in a rush of smoke, leaving only silence. Evelyn collapsed to her knees, tears streaking her face, her name still on her lips. Her identity burned brighter than the storm. But from beyond the door, the tall figure's whisper came softer now, almost gentle. Names last, but voices die. The storm outside howled again, and Evelyn realized the night wasn't over. Evelyn's voice rasped raw, every syllable scraping her throat like glass. She slumped against the wall, clutching the glowing shard. Her name still pulsed faintly across its surface, a fragile ember against the storm. The caretaker stumbled into the room, chain dragging in his hands. His lantern guttered, throwing sickly light over his gaunt face. He looked at her, bloodied, shaking, but alive, and for the first time, something like awe flickered in his eyes. You pulled it back, he whispered. No one's ever done that. Evelyn coughed, spit streaked with blood. Then we end it now. He froze. End it? She forced herself upright, every muscle trembling. The journal said it. The only thing they fear is being forgotten. If names hold them here, then maybe names can shut the door. The caretaker shook his head violently. You don't know what you're talking about. If you provoke it more, it'll take you. Her voice cracked but steady. It already tried. And it failed. Lightning split the sky outside, thunder rattling the windows. The unnumbered door groaned in its frame, chains rattling like bones. The tall figure's shadow pressed against the cracks, its faceless head tilting, listening. Evelyn's pulse thundered. She clutched the shard tighter and dragged herself into the hall. The caretaker grabbed her arm, his grip weak but desperate. If you try this, you won't come back. That thing doesn't let go. She turned to him, eyes burning. Then help me, or get out of my way. For a long, terrible moment, he stared at her, his face pale and hollow. Then he released her arm and stepped aside. His voice was barely a whisper. If anyone can, it's you. The chain shrieked, snapping taut. The lock bent outward. The unnumbered door pulsed with each slam, glowing faintly as if lit from inside by the void. Evelyn stepped forward, raising the shard high. Her voice tore from her chest, louder than the thunder, rawer than the storm. I am Evelyn Ward, and I seal you in my name. The air buckled. The house screamed. The tall figure's roar burst from the door, a sound like worlds splitting apart. And then the lock gave way. The hasp snapped with a sound like bone breaking. Chains whipped across the hallway, clattering against the walls before falling limp. The unnumbered door swung wide, and the darkness inside bled out in a flood, swallowing every flicker of light. Evelyn staggered back, shielding her eyes, though there was nothing to see, only the press of pure void, thick and suffocating. The air turned heavy, damp, tasting of earth and rust. Her lungs burned as she struggled to draw breath. Shapes emerged. First the children, pale bodies lurching across the threshold, their eyeless faces turned toward her. Their mouths gaped in unison, and the chant filled her skull. Keeper! 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 Behind them, the tall figure stepped forward. Its faceless head loomed above the doorframe, shoulders hunched to fit, arms dragging along the floor. The void stretched around it, pulling at the hallway like a tide. The caretaker cried out, swinging the chain wildly, the iron sparking against the boards. Each strike sent the smaller figures shrieking back, smoke hissing from their limbs. But there were too many. For every child that recoiled, 2 more crawled forward. Evelyn lifted the glowing shard, her name still etched into the glass. She forced her voice through the weight of the void. "I am Evelyn Ward. I am not yours." The children faltered, writhing as if the words scorched them. But the tall figure did not stop. Its void mouth stretched wider, a pit within a pit. "You are mine!" The words shook the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling. Floorboards split beneath its weight. Evelyn pressed the shard against her chest, her bloody palm burning. "Then take me," she spat, her voice raw. "But I'll drag you with me." The figure hesitated. Its head tilted, as though curious. For the first time, its chant faltered. Evelyn seized the moment. She slashed the shard across its arm. The glass sank into the void flesh, glowing brighter, burning like a brand. The figure reeled, shrieking without sound, its form collapsing inward. The children screamed in unison. Some scattered back into the door, others shriveled into nothing, their bodies unraveling into smoke. The hallway buckled, the house groaning like a dying beast. The caretaker stumbled to Evelyn's side, gripping her arm. His voice was ragged. "Finish it. Seal it now." The door yawned wider, the void pulling at everything. Her, the caretaker, the walls, the air itself. Evelyn raised the shard high. "I seal you!" she screamed, voice breaking. "In the only name that is mine!" The pull of the void clawed at Evelyn's skin, dragging her hair, tugging at her very breath. The caretaker clung to the doorframe, his knuckles white, his face a mask of terror. All around them, the children shrieked, their voices splintering the air into shards of noise. Evelyn gripped the glowing shard with both hands. The letters of her name blazed across its cracked surface, brighter than lightning. Her bloody palm seared where it touched, but she did not let go. The tall figure loomed above her, its void mouth widening to a cavern, promising to swallow her whole. "Say yes," it whispered. "End the pain." Her knees buckled. Her throat was raw, lungs burning from the storm of voices. But deep inside, beneath the fear, something harder sparked. She thought of her mother's lullaby, of the weight of her own voice when she screamed her name, of every mark she had carved into these walls. She was not nothing. With a roar that tore her throat raw, she drove the shard into the frame of the unnumbered door. Light exploded. The shard sank deep, embedding itself into the wood. The letters of her name scorched outward like fire racing across oil. They spread over the doorframe, the walls, the ceiling, Evelyn Ward, Evelyn Ward, Evelyn Ward, until the entire hallway blazed with her name. The children convulsed, their forms unraveling into smoke. Their screams faded into the storm, thin and ragged, before vanishing altogether. The tall figure staggered backward, its limbs flailing. Smoke poured from the wound in its chest where the iron had struck earlier. Its faceless head split open, spilling more void, but the light consumed it, burning away its edges until only a collapsing shadow remained. The door shuddered, the void within raging, pulling at everything. Evelyn felt her body sliding toward it, her blood, her breath, even her name dragged by its hunger. She clutched the frame, screaming the words again and again. "I am Evelyn Ward! I am Evelyn Ward!" The caretaker's voice joined hers, broken but loud. "Evelyn Ward!" The door screamed like tearing metal, then slammed shut with a force that shook the entire house. The shard cracked, splintering into dust. The letters of her name burned into the frame, glowing red-hot before cooling into black scars. Silence. For the first time since she had arrived, true silence filled the house. The silence was so complete it felt alien. No scratching in the walls, no whispers bleeding through the cracks. Even the storm outside had stilled, as though the sky itself were holding its breath. Evelyn slumped against the wall, her body trembling. Her throat was torn raw, her palm a shredded mess of blood and glass splinters. Every muscle ached, but she was still here. She pressed her back to the scarred doorframe, staring at the blackened letters seared deep into the wood. Evelyn Ward. The caretaker staggered beside her, leaning heavily on the chain. His chest heaved, sweat glistening on his brow. For the first time since she'd met him, he didn't look haunted. He looked empty. "You sealed it," he said hoarsely. "You actually sealed it." Evelyn's gaze flicked to him. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red, but a ghost of a smile touched his lips. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the fight was finished. But the house still loomed around them, vast, rotting, alive. The boards creaked under their weight, and the air still smelled faintly of earth and rot. "Is it over?" she asked. The caretaker's smile faltered. "For now." The words pressed heavy in her chest. "For now," she repeated, bitter. "That's all anyone ever says in this place." He lowered himself to the floor, shoulders sagging. "The door is scarred. It may hold for years. Longer, if the mark doesn't fade." Her eyes traced the letters burned into the frame. The thought of them fading made her stomach twist. She flexed her injured hand, blood dripping onto the boards. "I won't let it," she whispered. "Not ever." The caretaker closed his eyes, head lolling against the wall. "Then you'll outlast me. And maybe, if you're lucky, the house itself." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion crushed her. She sank to the floor, head resting against her knees. For a time, neither of them spoke. The silence of the house was absolute, but instead of comfort, it left a hollow ringing in her ears. Eventually, Evelyn lifted her head and stared at the door again. The letters were still there. Black. Scorched. But she could swear the wood pulsed faintly, like something beneath it was still breathing. Evelyn woke, with a start, her head against the wall, the boards pressing grooves into her cheek. For the first time since she had arrived, she had slept. Not deeply. Her dreams were muddled with shadows and whispers, but sleep all the same. The caretaker was still slumped nearby, his chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. His lantern had long since guttered out. Pale gray light seeped through the windows, soft and thin. She rose slowly, her body stiff, her palm throbbing where shards of glass were still embedded. Every movement pulled at the ragged cuts, but she ignored the pain. Her eyes were fixed on the unnumbered door. The black letters scarred into the frame remained. They looked dead, brittle, burned into place. The wood didn't pulse as it had last night. No rattling of chains, no faint knocks. Just stillness. She crept forward, pressing her ear to the door. The wood was cold. Nothing stirred on the other side. Evelyn exhaled, a shaky breath that fogged against the charred surface. For the first time since she had stepped into this house, she almost believed it was over. But almost wasn't enough. She grabbed one of the journals from the caretaker's desk and opened it on the floor by the doorframe. She dipped her finger into her own blood and traced the letters again, darkening them, making the mark deeper. Her voice was a rasp, but she spoke anyway. "I am Evelyn Ward. This house will not forget me." The boards creaked faintly in reply. Just the old wood, she told herself. Just the house breathing. The caretaker stirred behind her, groaning as he shifted. His eyes cracked open, bleary. "You're still here," he muttered. She turned toward him, the journal open in her lap, her blood drying in harsh streaks across the page. "We have to make sure it stays sealed." He chuckled weakly. "You sound like me, when I thought I could outsmart it." Her jaw tightened. "Maybe I can." The house gave no answer. But as light strengthened through the windows, Evelyn swore she saw a faint shimmer across the blackened letters, like heat rising off stone. The scar was holding. For now. The morning sun was thin, filtered through mist, but it still painted the walls with a color Evelyn had not seen since arriving, warmth. She walked the hallway slowly, her bare feet whispering against the boards. Every door was shut, every bulb steady. The silence pressed at her ears, but for once it wasn't suffocating, it was fragile, like glass. She paused at room 4, the one where she had found the children's drawings etched into the plaster. With a deep breath, she turned the knob. It opened easily. The air was stale, dust curling in the sunlight, but the wall was bare. The drawings, those stick figures with gouged-out eyes, were gone. She touched the plaster, half expecting it to ripple under her fingers, but it was only cold. Her throat tightened. The house had never hidden its rot before. She moved on, testing each door in turn. All open to emptiness. Rooms with bare floors, furniture covered in sheets, nothing more. No scratches, no laughter, no shadows darting at the edge of sight. Downstairs, the caretaker sat hunched in his chair, chain coiled in his lap. He looked smaller in the daylight, a husk of the man who had clung to survival for decades. His eyes tracked her as she descended. "Well?" he rasped. "They're gone," she said, though the words tasted like a lie. His gaze drifted to the ceiling. "Don't trust it. The house knows how to rest. It waits until you believe it's sleeping." Evelyn crossed the parlor, pulling aside a curtain. The yard lay quiet. The swing hung still. The woods beyond stood gray and lifeless, no whispers drifting between their trunks. For a moment, she almost believed she could step outside and keep walking. But when she glanced back, the scarred door at the end of the hall seemed to pulse faintly in her vision. Not moving. Not groaning. Just waiting. She pressed her bloody palm against the glass of the window and whispered, "I am Evelyn Ward." The caretaker closed his eyes, weary. "Keep saying it," he muttered. "Because the house is listening. Always." Evelyn stared at the door until her eyes watered. The silence held. Evelyn's resolve hardened with every quiet tick of the caretaker's clock. Silence was a lie, she knew that much, but silence also gave her a chance. If the house was weakened, if the seal had done more than just wound it, maybe the road would finally let her go. She found her coat by the door, stiff with dried mud from her last attempt. Her injured hand throbbed as she pulled it on, the sleeves sticking where blood had crusted. The caretaker stirred in his chair, his clouded eyes narrowing. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To see if it still has me," she said. He gave a bitter laugh, dry as parchment. "It always has you." But Evelyn didn't answer. She pulled the door open and stepped into the gray morning. The yard was still damp from the storm. Mud sucked at her boots, but the air was crisp, almost clean. She crossed past the swing, its chains dripping faintly, and onto the track that passed for a road. She walked faster this time, counting each step, her voice a steady whisper against the silence. "I am Evelyn Ward. I am Evelyn Ward." The trees pressed close, dark and skeletal, but the path stretched clear ahead. Her chest tightened. Last time, by this point, she had already looped back. She pressed onward. The track curved, dipped, rose again. Her heart pounded harder with every step. She crested the rise and stopped cold. The guest house sat at the end of the track. The porch sagging, the windows dark, the scarred door barely visible through the upstairs hall window. "No," she whispered. Her knees weakened. She spun on her heel and plunged into the trees, branches tearing at her coat. She fought through thickets, scrambled over roots, ran until her lungs screamed, and broke into the yard again. The swing swayed gently, as though laughing. Evelyn staggered to her knees, mud soaking her clothes. She dug her nails into the earth and screamed her name until her voice cracked. "Evelyn Ward!" The sound echoed, but nothing answered. No children's laughter. No whispers. Only silence. She sat there shaking, staring at the house, which loomed quiet and patient. The trap was still whole. Evelyn stumbled back inside, her boots caked in mud, her throat raw from shouting. The caretaker was where she had left him, hunched in the parlor chair with the chain across his lap. He didn't even look surprised when she slammed the door behind her. "It brought me back again," she hissed. "The road, the woods, it all loops. Always back to the yard." The caretaker's head tilted slightly, his eyes clouded with something between pity and exhaustion. "You thought it would be different." Her fists clenched. The door is sealed. I scarred it with my name. The house should be weaker now. I thought, her voice cracked. I thought maybe it would let me go. He gave a weary laugh. That's the lie. It doesn't let anyone go. Not me, not the ones before me. Even when you think you've beaten it, the house waits. It knows you'll tire. And when you do, it takes you. Evelyn paced the room, her boots leaving streaks of mud on the boards. So what then? We just rot here until it wins? His gaze hardened. That's what being the keeper means. Her chest tightened. The word again. Keeper. It had haunted every night, every whisper. She stopped pacing and glared at him. How long have you known it was me? That the house chose me? He looked away. Since the night you touched the door. Her stomach twisted. And you didn't warn me? What would warning change? His voice was sharp, breaking through the fog of his weariness. If I told you you'd run, and then you'd circle back, same as today. Same as every day until the house was ready to devour you. Evelyn's nails dug into her palms. I'm not going to be devoured. He studied her for a long, silent moment. Then his lips twitched into the faintest smile. Good. Maybe you'll last longer than the rest. The fire in the hearth sputtered, though no one had stoked it. Smoke curled upward, twisting into letters for the briefest instant. Her name. Evelyn's blood ran cold. The house had not forgotten. It was waiting. The fire in the hearth popped, and the smoke curled again, forming letters in the air. Evelyn Ward. The words trembled before dispersing into the rafters. Evelyn staggered back, bow rising in her throat. Did you see that? The caretaker's eyes flicked to the hearth, then back to her. Daylight means nothing here. As if to prove him right, the house groaned deep in its beams. The sound spread through the floorboards, a low rumble that made the journal pages flutter. And then, from the walls themselves came a whisper. Evelyn Ward. Her stomach clenched. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the voice was inside her head now, weaving through her thoughts. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't furious. It was patient, coaxing. Evelyn Ward. Say yes. Her throat worked against the words, unbidden. She bit down hard on her tongue until blood filled her mouth. The taste grounded her, kept her from answering. The caretaker rose shakily, gripping the chain in both hands. It's testing you. It always does, after the first seal. The house won't strike yet. It just wants to know how close you are to breaking. She spat blood onto the floorboards. And if I do break? His face was grim. Then you become the door. Her heart lurched. The door? He nodded once. Every keeper who fails doesn't just vanish. They're pulled into the frame, part of the wood, part of the dark. That's why it's always hungry. That's why it whispers. It wants you to be the next lock. Evelyn's gaze darted to the scorched scar of her name on the doorframe upstairs. She imagined faces pressed into the wood, mouths screaming silently from within. Her stomach heaved. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. Evelyn Ward. Keeper. 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 Her hands trembled, nails biting into her palms. She whispered her name back, ragged, broken. I am Evelyn Ward. I am Evelyn Ward. The whisper paused. Then it laughed, a sound like dry leaves rustling. Not for long. The caretaker's face went pale. It's already inside the walls. The laughter inside the walls spread, moving from room to room like a swarm of insects. Evelyn pressed her palms against the plaster, feeling the faintest vibration beneath her skin, as though the boards themselves were whispering her name. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. The caretaker lurched into the hall, his chain dragging, his face drawn with exhaustion. It's starting early. Night won't wait this time. The bulbs above them flickered, though daylight still filtered through the curtains. Shadows bent the wrong way, stretching long across the floorboards as if drawn toward the unnumbered door upstairs. Evelyn backed toward the parlor. Then we fight early. The caretaker's mouth twisted in a grim smile. That's the only way. She ran to the table where the journals lay in a heap. Flipping through them with frantic hands, she searched for anything, any mention of the house attacking outside of night. One passage caught her eye. When the walls begin to stir, the seal is thinning. Reinforce it with the keeper's blood, spoken and written. Iron may wound, but blood binds. Evelyn's stomach churned. Her palm was already raw and bleeding from glass splinters. She tore the page out, dipped her finger in the cut, and began smearing her name across the parlor walls. Each letter burned faintly, glowing red before settling into black scars. The whispers recoiled, hissing. The house groaned louder, beams rattling. The caretaker staggered to the window and cursed. "It's pulling the dark in, look!" Evelyn turned. Outside, the daylight dimmed unnaturally, as though clouds had rolled in without warning. The trees beyond the yard were gone, swallowed in a gray haze. The swing twitched, moving though no wind stirred. The house pulsed under her feet. Her name hissed from the plaster where she had written it, half mocking, half defiant. She pressed her bloody hand harder into the wall and screamed it again. "I am Evelyn Ward!" The laughter cut off. Silence pressed thick as cloth. And then the unnumbered door upstairs rattled, shaking violently in its frame. The house wasn't waiting for night anymore. The rattling from upstairs grew violent, a steady pounding that made dust rain from the ceiling. Evelyn grabbed the chain from the caretaker's hands and bolted toward the staircase. "Don't!" he croaked, his voice hoarse. "It wants you close." But she was already running. The stairs shuddered under her feet, each step vibrating as though alive. When she reached the top, the air felt heavier, pressing against her chest, stealing her breath. The unnumbered door bulged inward, the scorched letters of her name glowing faintly before dimming with each slam. The wood groaned, splinters shooting from the frame. The whispers surged again, filling the hallway. "Keeper! Keeper! Evelyn Ward! Keeper!" Her hands shook as she looped the chain through the hasp and yanked it tight. The iron seared her palms, but the links held, bracing the door for the moment. The caretaker stumbled up behind her, gasping. "It's feeding on the seal. Every time you speak your name, it learns. It's turning your anchor into a weapon." Evelyn's eyes locked on the faint shimmer crawling across the blackened letters. Her own name, bending, warping. "Then I'll give it more to choke on." She dug the letter opener from her pocket and carved fresh lines into the wall beside the door. Her blood smeared with the wood, the words ragged but clear, "Evelyn Ward." The door shrieked in answer. The children's voices wailed through the cracks, furious, hungry. The caretaker swung the chain against the frame, iron sparking. For a heartbeat, the house faltered. The bulbs flared, flooding the hall with blinding yellow light. And then, just as suddenly, every lamp in the house shattered. Glass rained from the ceiling. Darkness swallowed the hallway whole. In the pitch black, Evelyn heard a new sound, low, guttural, wet. A breathing that did not belong to her or the caretaker. It was already in the hall. The dark pressed against Evelyn's skin like wet cloth. She could barely hear her own ragged breathing over the guttural rasp echoing down the corridor. It was slower than the children's laughter, heavier, more deliberate. The caretaker's lantern had gone out with the bulbs. She heard him fumbling with the chain in the dark, muttering prayers that cracked mid-syllable. The breathing moved closer. "Evelyn Ward." The voice was not dozens of children. It was one voice, deep, drawn out, as if spoken by lungs full of water. Her fingers tightened on the letter opener. "I am Evelyn Ward," she whispered, though her voice trembled. The sound came again, nearer now, a dragging step, followed by the wet pull of something heavy across the boards. She slashed blindly, the blade cutting only air. A hand brushed her ankle. She screamed, stabbing downward. The blade connected with something that hissed and recoiled, a splash of cold liquid soaking her foot. The smell of rust and rot filled her nose. The caretaker's voice rasped from the dark. "Iron, Evelyn! Hit it with iron!" She groped blindly until her fingers caught the broken chain. She swung it wide, the links clattering, and the air shuddered as it struck. A screech split the hall, high and furious. For an instant, pale light flickered, enough for her to glimpse it. Not a child. Not the tall figure. something else. Its body was swollen, its skin split with black veins, its head bent wrong as though broken long ago. Where its eyes should have been were only gaping holes, dripping void. Then the light died, and it melted back into the dark. Evelyn's chest heaved, the chain rattling in her grip. "What was that?" The caretaker's silence stretched before he whispered. "One of the keepers, before me." Her stomach lurched. She pressed her back against the scarred door, clutching the chain like a lifeline. The house had not just taken them. It had remade them. And now they walked the halls. The rasping breaths circled them in the dark, closer, then farther, always moving. Evelyn swung the chain wildly, each strike sparking against the walls or floorboards, but never flesh. The caretaker leaned against the wall, his own breath ragged, his grip trembling around what was left of the lantern. The voice came again, broken and wet. "Keeper, join us." Evelyn's skin crawled. "It's mocking me," she whispered. The caretaker's voice was sharp. "Not mocking. Remembering. That thing was a keeper. It knows the words, but it doesn't know what they mean anymore." Her chest tightened. The thought of being hollowed out like that, of her name stripped until nothing was left but a walking shadow, made bile rise in her throat. "Then we don't let it touch me." The floor creaked. Heavy, deliberate steps. Then silence. Evelyn whispered her name, her voice cracking. "Evelyn Ward." The breathing paused, as though the thing listened. She whispered it again, louder, pushing the syllables into the dark. "Evelyn Ward!" The rasp turned into a shriek. It lunged. She swung the chain with both hands. The links cracked across something solid, iron-searing flesh. A scream tore through the hallway, shaking dust from the ceiling. In the faint glow of splintered bulbs, she glimpsed the creature writhing, its skin bubbling where the iron struck, black smoke spilling from the wounds. The caretaker roared hoarsely and hurled the broken lantern. The glass shattered against the figure, and though the flame had long since died, the oil still burned faintly, licking across its torso. The creature thrashed, slamming itself against the walls until the boards cracked. Evelyn pressed forward, swinging the chain again and again, each strike landing with the sound of sizzling meat. Her throat tore as she screamed her name with every blow. "I am Evelyn Ward!" The final strike snapped the figure's neck with a sickening crack. It convulsed once, then collapsed into a puddle of shadow that seeped back into the cracks of the floor. The house groaned above them, a long, shuddering sound. Evelyn dropped the chain, chest heaving. "If that was a keeper," she whispered, "then the house keeps them even after they're gone." The caretaker's voice was low, broken. "And it will do the same to you." Evelyn sat against the wall, her bloody hands still clutching the chain. Her breath came in ragged pulls, each one scraping her throat raw. The puddle of shadow where the creature had collapsed was already fading, seeping into the cracks until the boards looked bare again. The caretaker lowered himself beside her with a groan, his body shaking. His face was ashen, eyes hollow. "You see now," he rasped. "The house doesn't just feed on us, it keeps us. Every failed keeper is another door it tries to open." Evelyn shook her head, bow rising. "I won't end up like that. I won't." His laugh was bitter, thin. "They all said that." She shoved the chain aside and grabbed one of the journals from the floor where it had fallen. Flipping through the brittle pages, she found entry after entry scrawled in frantic hands. None spoke of escape. All spoke of endurance, of fighting the night. All ended abruptly. "No one tried to destroy it," she muttered. "Not really." The caretaker's head turned toward her. "Destroy the house?" He shook his head slowly. "It's not wood and stone. It's hunger given shape. How do you kill something that isn't alive?" Evelyn's eyes fell to the scarred door at the end of the hall. Her name still burned faintly across the frame. "You don't fight it with fire. You fight it with what it fears." The caretaker frowned. "Names?" She nodded, throat tight. "If it feeds on keepers, if it steals their names to make them hollow, then the only way to kill it is to bind it with mine. To choke it forever." The caretaker's face paled. "You'd seal yourself with it. You'd never leave." Evelyn's pulse thundered. I can't leave anyway. But I can end it. His hand shook as he gripped her arm. You'd become the lock. You'd be the next door. Her voice cracked, but her eyes held his. Better me once than hundreds more after. The house creaked above them, as though listening, amused. From behind the unnumbered door came a faint, eager knock. The caretaker's grip on her arm trembled, but Evelyn gently pulled free. Her bloody palm left a print on his sleeve, stark against the fabric. She rose unsteadily, her legs weak from blood loss, from nights of screaming her name until it frayed. I'm not letting this house keep anyone else, she said. The caretaker's voice broke. You're still alive. You still have a name. Don't give it up. Evelyn looked at the scorched letters carved into the unnumbered doorframe. The mark still pulsed faintly, like cooling embers. I already gave it up the moment I touched that door. It's been mine since then, and you know it. The old man slumped back against the wall, chain rattling from his lap to the floor. His eyes were wet. If you do this, it'll take you into its walls. You'll be nothing but a voice it mocks for eternity. She shook her head. No. If I bind it with my whole name, every part of me, it won't have room to use me. It'll choke on me. It'll end. Silence filled the hallway. The house groaned once, almost approvingly, like a predator humoring its prey. Evelyn tore strips of fabric from her coat and bound her wounded hand as best she could. She picked up the shard of mirror still glowing faintly, the letters of her name etched deep. Its surface reflected her pale, hollow face, but behind her reflection the void shimmered, waiting. She tucked the shard into her palm until the edge bit deep, her blood mingling with the light. The caretaker pushed himself shakily to his feet. Then I'll stand with you. If you're going to the door, I'll drag it shut after. Evelyn's throat ached, but she managed a small, broken smile. You've kept it this long. You deserve rest. They both turned toward the unnumbered door. The frame shuddered as though it sensed their decision. Black veins crept across the wood, pulsing in rhythm with the faint knock that echoed from the other side. The storm outside returned suddenly, rattling the windows. The house's laughter rose faintly from the walls, eager. Evelyn lifted the shard, her voice raw but certain. I am Evelyn Ward, and I will end you. The unnumbered door quivered in its frame, the faint knock becoming a pounding heartbeat that rattled the walls. Evelyn stepped closer, the shard gripped tight in her bleeding hand. Each drop of blood that fell hissed against the boards, as if the house itself recoiled from it. The caretaker stood behind her, chain draped over his shoulders, his face pale and hollow. If you start this, he said, there's no stopping until it takes you. Evelyn didn't turn. That's the point. She pressed the shard against the doorframe. Its glow flared, the etched letters of her name burning brighter. She carved the shard downward, dragging her own blood across the wood. Letters bloomed where the edge touched, Evelyn Ward, seared into the frame in jagged lines of light. The house shrieked. The boards buckled under her feet, the ceiling cracked. From within the door came the children's wails, dozens of voices screaming her name, twisting it into mockery. Evelyn Ward. Evelyn Ward. Ours. Ours. She shouted over them, her voice raw, her chest tearing with the effort. I am Evelyn Ward. Each syllable burned into the wood, the frame glowing like molten metal. The caretaker swung the chain against the door, iron sparking with each strike. The children screamed louder, their forms pressing against the cracks, small hands, eyeless faces, mouths opening in soundless hunger. Evelyn didn't falter. She pressed her forehead to the scorched wood and smeared the last of her blood into the letters. My name is mine, she gasped, and I bind you with it. The tall figure's voice thundered from the void, deeper than the storm. Then you will stay with us. The door burst outward, black wind slamming into her, dragging her hair and coat toward the void. Evelyn gripped the shard tighter, blood running freely down her arm, her name blazing across every surface of the hall. Her feet slid toward the opening. The caretaker grabbed her waist, holding her back, his voice breaking as he roared her name into the dark. Evelyn Ward! The house howled in fury. The hall became a gale of black wind. It tore at Evelyn's coat, at her hair, pulling her toward the door as though the void were a living mouth desperate to swallow her whole. The letters of her name flared across the wood, burning hotter, but with each pulse she felt her strength drain, as if every repetition carved from her soul rather than her voice. The caretaker clung to her waist, his wiry arms surprisingly strong, the chain dragging from his shoulder. "Don't let go!" he bellowed. Her blood smeared further into the frame, her hands slipping as she pressed the shard deeper. She could feel the wood blistering under her palm, hear the screaming of the children on the other side. "Keep her! Keep her! Evelyn Ward! Keep her!" Her throat was raw, but she forced the words past the tearing in her chest. "I am Evelyn Ward!" The tall figure pushed against the threshold. Its faceless head appeared first, then its shoulders, each movement shaking the beams of the house. Its void mouth opened wide, and from it poured not laughter, not whispers, silence. A silence so heavy it crushed Evelyn's thoughts, smothering her voice. Her name slipped from her lips. She choked, gasping. The caretaker screamed it for her. "Evelyn Ward!" He struck the figure with the chain, iron sizzling as it connected. The creature reeled back, but the silence lingered, pressing down on them both. Evelyn's mind flickered. Her memories blurred, the lullaby, her books, her mother's smile, all unraveling like threads. The house was taking her name, unspooling it until nothing remained. "No!" she rasped. She pressed the shard to her chest, digging until it cut through fabric and into skin. Pain shot through her ribs, anchoring her. With a final cry, she screamed, "I am Evelyn Ward, and you will die with me!" Her blood poured freely, soaking the frame. The letters blazed so bright the entire hall burned white. The tall figure shrieked, its form collapsing inward, consumed by the light. Her blood poured freely, soaking the frame. The letters blazed so bright the entire hall burned white. The tall figure shrieked, its form collapsing inward, consumed by the light. The void roared, dragging harder, pulling at everything, her, the caretaker, even the walls themselves. The house was coming down. The hallway shook like the spine of a dying beast. Boards cracked under Evelyn's knees, dust rained from the ceiling, and the black wind roared, pulling everything toward the gaping door. The letters of her name blazed across the frame, but the light flickered, guttering like a candle in a storm. Evelyn's fingers slipped against the shard. It was slick with her blood, the glass biting deeper into her palm with every heartbeat. She dug it harder into the wood, smearing more of herself across the frame. The tall figure screamed, its form unraveling as the light seared through it. Chunks of shadow peeled from its body, sucked back into the void like smoke into a vent. But even in its collapse, it stretched a hand toward her, long, skeletal, impossibly fast. The caretaker lunged, wrapping his arms around her waist. The chain rattled against the boards as he braced himself, his boots sliding across the floor. "Hold on!" he roared, though his voice cracked with terror. The hand brushed Evelyn's shoulder, cold as death. 1,000 whispers burst in her head all at once. "You are ours, you are ours, you are ours." Her knees buckled. The pull of the void dragged her forward until half her body was across the threshold. She stared into the dark and saw faces, keepers, dozens of them, their mouths open in endless screams. Their eyes burned like coals, pleading and accusing all at once. Her blood-soaked shard slipped from her hand and tumbled into the void. The light dimmed. "No!" she screamed, clawing at the frame with torn nails. Her voice was fading, her name slipping away again. The caretaker bellowed her name, louder than the storm. "Evelyn Ward!" His voice cracked but carried, cutting through the void's chorus. "Say it, girl! Say it back!" Her throat tore as she forced the words out. "I am Evelyn Ward!" The letters flared again, brighter than before, scorching across the frame and searing into the collapsing figure's chest. The void shrieked, a sound like tearing worlds. But the pull did not stop. Evelyn felt her body sliding, inch by inch, into the endless dark. Evelyn's fingernails split against the scorched frame as the void dragged her forward. Her chest hit the threshold, her face inches from the screaming dark. The children's hands clawed from within, grasping at her arms, her clothes, her hair. The caretaker clung to her waist, his thin frame trembling with the effort. His voice cracked with every shout. "Don't let go! Don't give in!" Her blood had soaked the frame, dripping in rivulets down the wood. The letters of her name still blazed, but each flare left her weaker, as though every stroke of fire consumed another piece of her soul. She twisted her head toward him, her voice shredded. "If I stay, it ends. If you pull me out, it starts again." His eyes burned, wild with grief. "No! You can't!" The void roared, drowning his words. The tall figures remained swirled like smoke, collapsing into a vortex that pulled harder, harder. Evelyn's arms buckled. Her knees slid across the boards. She met the caretaker's gaze one last time. "Thank you for holding them back this long." "No, don't you dare!" She tore herself free of his grip. With the last of her strength, she pressed both bloody palms flat against the frame. The shard's glow pulsed from within the wood, reigniting in a blaze of light. Her voice broke into a scream that carried through the entire house. "I am Evelyn Ward, and I seal you with my name!" The door erupted in fire and shadow. The house wailed, beams splitting, windows shattering. The void shrieked, swallowing itself. The caretaker was thrown back, his body slamming against the opposite wall. He raised his arms to shield his eyes from the white light that consumed the hall. Through it, he saw Evelyn's silhouette, hair whipping, arms outstretched, before she was swallowed whole by the door. The light flared once, blinding, then collapsed inward. Silence. The door slammed shut. Her name burned across the frame, deep and black, etched into the wood like a scar that would never fade. The caretaker staggered to his feet, his body trembling. He reached for the handle, but it was cold. "Dead. Evelyn," he whispered, his voice breaking. The house groaned once, faintly. Then it went still. The house was silent. Not the waiting silence Evelyn had grown to fear, but something heavier, like a tomb. The caretaker stood in the ruined hallway, the air acrid with smoke and scorched wood. Shards of glass crunched under his boots as he staggered toward the unnumbered door. Her name blazed across the frame, etched deeper than any mark he had ever seen. Evelyn Ward. The letters smoldered faintly, as if written in fire. He reached out with a shaking hand, brushing his fingertips over the grooves. They were real. Solid. He whispered her name, and the door did not stir. No whispers answered. No scratching hands clawed from behind the wood. The void was sealed. His body sagged with exhaustion, his breath rattling. For the first time in decades, the house did not breathe with him. He could almost imagine it was just wood and stone again, a broken guest house in the woods, not a prison. But the cost. He sank to his knees before the door, tears streaking the grime of his face. "You did what none of us could," he rasped. "You ended it. Evelyn Ward." The name echoed down the hall, but only as his voice, not the house's. Morning came. Pale light broke through shattered windows, falling across dust and ruin. The caretaker shuffled to the parlor, collapsed into his chair, and closed his eyes. For once, he let sleep take him. The house did not protest. Outside, the swings swayed gently in the breeze. The woods stood still, no whispers curling between their trunks. For the first time in memory, the world beyond the yard was simply quiet. Upstairs, the unnumbered door remained shut. Evelyn's name glowed faintly in the frame, a scar the house could never heal. Her sacrifice held. For now, and maybe forever, the house remembered her. The end.